Hey, Miko, I'll bring you in right after the intro plays. Yeah. Just got to check Rockfin. Rumble.
I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Thursday, guys. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays and Fridays, and you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. And welcome back, guys. We're actually going to go ahead and kick things off with our special guest. Miko Peled is here. He is an Israeli-American activist and author. He is the author of, my screen. There we go. He's the author of the books, The General's Son, The Journey of an Israeli in Palestine and Injustice, The Story of the Holy Land Foundation 5, and he is also an inspirational speaker. So let's go ahead and bring in Miko. Hello, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm hoping that you can educate people here tonight because I don't know if you know, but we've been very, I think, frustrated a little bit about some of the rhetoric in reference to Israel and Palestine, and particularly from some presidential candidates, so to speak. But thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for joining me.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, Miko, I want to go ahead and get started with this idea that Israel is not, basically trying to commit, apartheid. So, for example, I think one of the disagreements that tends to be, I don't know necessarily on the left, so to speak, but there tends to be a disagreement in reference to whether or not Israel is now an apartheid state. Some of us have tried to make the connection to South Africa and what happened there in reference to apartheid. But we have received pushback from people who tell us that it is not apartheid. For example, someone like RFK Jr. And I want to get your opinion about this. How would you describe it? What's happening to Palestinians in Israel?
Well, again, thanks for having me on your show. And this is a great question to kick off the conversation. So never mind what I think. Never mind what Palestinians have been saying for almost 100 years, 75 years. Last year, Amnesty International came out with a report on apartheid in Palestine. And if anybody hasn't seen the report, it's available online. It's about 200 pages, but there's also a summary. It's a very easy and a very important read. And in this report, Amnesty International makes it absolutely clear that from the moment the state of Israel was established, it was engaged in a crime against humanity. Apartheid, if people don't know, Apartheid is designated as a crime so heinous that it is designated as a crime against humanity. And from the very beginning, from the moment the state of Israel was established, it has been engaged, according to Amnesty International. And there's plenty of data. I mean, the report is very comprehensive. They worked many years and had to overcome a lot of hurdles, as you can imagine. And it's a very courageous report. I would take it one step further. I would say that Israel, not that Israel is engaged in apartheid, Israel is apartheid. Israel is apartheid. Israel is not committing a crime against humanity. Israel is a crime against humanity. Now, what the Zionists did, as opposed to South Africa, the South Africans called it apartheid, which is an ugly name, an ugly word. It means separation, it means segregation. They named it Israel. It's biblical. So right away, you've got all kinds of Christians around the world going, oh my God, it's Israel. How could it possibly be apartheid? These are Jews. Nancy Pelosi one time said, it's unconscionable to say that Jews would ever support apartheid, as though Jews were somehow, saints. So there's no question. Now, I was born and raised there on the privileged side of the apartheid. And I can tell you categorically, without any doubt whatsoever, it was, and it is, and it will continue to be as long as we allow it to be a brutal form of apartheid. And anybody who wants to deny it, I will challenge them right now and take them with me to Palestine. And they can tell me how it's not apartheid.
Right. Why do you feel that some people are denying that?
Well, I think politicians deny it because for some reason they think that if they support Israel, it makes them look good. And Israel is this, I think there's something wrong here. American politicians have this need to love Israel. It's some kind of a, it's some kind of a madness, I think. It's seriously, it's some kind of a disease. I'm not sure I understand what it is. What we see is that people think that the response to accusations of anti-Semitism is to love Israel. Well, so let's clarify that a little bit. Let's unpack that. Israel is a racist state built on a racist ideology called Zionism, which says that I, as a Jew, as an Israeli Jew, have privileges over the Palestinians in Palestine. I have rights in Palestine that Palestinians do not have. And just yesterday, one of Israel's senior ministers, the minister of national security, nonetheless, stood in front on national TV and said it outright. I have more rights on the, than any Arab does, in this country. And it, of course, that's kind of been the practice anyway. So to say that the answer to anti-Semitism is a racist ideology and an apartheid state is absolute madness. Any form of racism, if it's anti-Semitism, any sort of form of supremacy, including Zionism, needs to be rejected completely. There should be no tolerance for racism, period. Zionism, like anti-Semitism, like white supremacy, these are all forms of racism and should all be rejected. The idea that you answer accusations of anti-Semitism by saying you support Israel is absolutely ludicrous.
I know. I think some people feel like that's the correct response. And some of those people that feel that way are RFK Jr. I want to show you this clip here. Now, this was an event that RFK Jr. had in New York City with Rabbi Shmuley. One of the clips that came from this discussion, it was a longer discussion, but this one, RFK Jr. says Israel is unique in the Middle East because they only attack military targets. I want you to hear this, and I want to get your opinion on this as well.
Israel is unique in the Mideast for saying we're only going to attack military targets. And they're very, very disciplined about doing so. Palestine, the Palestinian Authority, in contrast, follows a long tradition of deliberately targeting civilians. So anybody, and not only that, but they have a pay-to-slay policy. That is the official policy of the Palestinian Authority. If you kill a Jew, not a member of the IDF. If you kill any Jew, you are going to get awarded with pay for life. And if you go to jail or you're killed, your family will get payments for life. And the official policy of Hamas is the genocide of all the Jews. So they consider, and this, by the way, in 1948, when Israel was attacked at its birth, the plans were captured of Syria and Egypt and the other nations, and their plan was complete extermination of the Jews. They took the side of Hitler during World War II. They lost the war, and the practice and the policy of all those nations is to kill individual civilians, whereas Israel does the opposite. It only attacks military targets.
Okay, so I would like to hear what you have to say in response to that statement there from RFK Jr. What do you think about that when he says that Israel is only attacking military targets? And I bring up the example of the Palestinian journalist that was shot and killed. We also brought up examples of one of the hospitals was actually bombed, and a school as well. What do you think about that statement that RFK Jr. made?
It's grotesque. It's absolutely grotesque that he would sit there on the same sofa with that racist, Zionist loudmouth, the Shmuley Boteach character, and spew these racist, filthy, abhorrent lies. None of what he said in that clip, and I've watched this clip, I've watched the entire thing several times, trying not to throw up as I was doing it, is absolutely grotesque that he would sit there and spew these racist, vile accusations against Palestinians. Let me tell you something, and to the listeners, Palestinians have never had an army. They've never had a tank. They've never had a military force. They've never had a helicopter or a fighter plane. Israel has been murdering thousands and thousands of Palestinians wholesale. There are no military. There is no Palestinian military. There's never been one. In 1948, Israel expelled close to 1 million Palestinians. God only knows how many were massacred along the way. Massacres in Lid, in Ramle, in Jaffa, in Dir Yassin, in Jerusalem, in the Galilee. Massacres in the Nakab in the south. Wholesale massacres in 1948. And to this day, these massacres continue. When Israel bombs Gaza, they are massacring civilians. And they do this on a regular basis from the air. It is an absolute, and I'll say it again, an absolutely grotesque lie. Every word he said there was absolutely false. Israel has been targeting civilians because Palestinians are civilians. Sure, they've had militias here and there, trying to fight, but the vast majority of Palestinians, there's never been, like I said, there's never been a Palestinian military force, and Israel is massacring thousands wholesale. Shirin Abu Akleh that you mentioned, there was a targeted assassination. A 2-year-old boy a couple months ago, Muhammad Tamimi from the village of Rabbi Saleh, was targeted shot in the head, and on and on and on. I mean, the examples go on forever. For him to sit there and spew these lies is absolute madness. And whoever it was in his campaign that thought that this was a good idea ought to be fired, because he lost serious supporters. He lost some very serious supporters. Many of them I know, that I meet with, that I talk to here in Washington, D.C. and around the country. He lost some very serious supporters by sitting there and spewing these lies. The United States gives $3.8 billion in foreign aid to a country that's rich, that doesn't need foreign aid, is an apartheid state, as it was made very clearly by a report by Amnesty International, and of course, countless testimonies by people who are from there, like myself and others. And it is absolutely absurd that they give all this money and that Americans are supporting this. Americans need to know that Israel is a racist state engaged in genocide and ethnic cleansing and apartheid. And there needs to be this support for Israel, this adoration of Israel. The mayor of New York was just there too. It's like this apartheid Mecca that they all feel that they need to, make pilgrimage to. It's absolutely grotesque.
Well, thank you so much for saying that, because there have been people that have reached out to his campaign to have this conversation with him. Max Blumenthal is one of them that's been trying to have this conversation with RFK Jr. That conversation has not happened, even though RFK said it's supposed to happen. That has not happened, and it's been quite a while. I know other people that have reached out to try to have this conversation with him as well. That conversation is not happening. I don't know what's happening in reference to the campaign, but it is very clear to me that they tend to be shielding him from people to have this conversation. And I have to ask why. And I'm curious, where do you think those talking points are coming from? Where is this? Is this quoted elsewhere? Like, where is he getting this rhetoric from?
This is the Zionist playbook. He got it 5 minutes before that. You can see he's still not quite rehearsed, and so some of the lines didn't come out quite right. He was still hesitating. He got that, he got a booklet 5 minutes before, the talking points from Shmuel Boteach that was sitting right next to him. He was spewing these lies. I'm sure I don't know if he had a teleprompter, but you could tell that he wasn't even rehearsed well enough to spew these lies, because you can't make this stuff up. This is the Zionist playbook. This is the Zionist narrative. It's lies and racism all put together into this narrative that, for reasons beyond understanding, even though I think many people know they're lies, they continue to repeat them as though they're the truth. And so, I know about these conversations. He's not going to engage, certainly not publicly, with anybody. Once he put his arm around that racist that was sitting next to him on that sofa, that racist, Zionist, hateful, terrorist, violence-supporting Shmuel Boteach, he supports every despicable crime, every massacre that Israel commits. He stands up there and supports it. When RFK Jr. put his hand around that man, that was it. The game over. I don't know why anybody should even consider sitting with RFK Jr. and talking to him about this. He went way too far, as far as I'm concerned, to for anyone like on our side to be willing to engage with him. He didn't have to do this, and he did it anyway.
Well, what's interesting is Dennis Kucinich is the campaign manager. Dennis Kucinich spoke out years ago in favor of the Palestinian struggle. So that, I think that's where the confusion is for me. Like, Dennis Kucinich knows that this is not correct.
Yeah. It's confusing to many people. It was confusing to me too. And I don't know. So he made a strategic decision that I believe is catastrophic, because now it paints his candidate as a fool and a supporter of apartheid, but supporter all the way. Not even, he didn't even leave any room for any wiggle room there. He went all in with his support for this racism, and he's supposed to be the guy that's challenging the narrative, the official narrative. Somebody made a decision. I think whoever made that decision, if it is Kucinich, it was a catastrophic decision.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about is I've actually seen video footage of Ethiopian Jews also in Israel dealing with similar situations as the Palestinians. They're being told to get out. Some of them were actually born there. I'm sure you know about the history about that, but some of them were actually born there, and they're being told that they're not wanted there either. And I do feel like a lot of times when we talk about Israel, we talk about what's happening with the Palestinian people, but I do want people to understand that there's also a group of Ethiopian Jews, and they are Jewish, for people who don't understand, but they are Jewish. They're also being told to leave. Why do you think that is?
Well, there are two groups, I think, that we need to discuss, and sometimes people confuse them. You've got the Ethiopians who are brought there, and then you have Sudanese asylum seekers. And 20 or so years ago, Israel allowed the Sudanese asylum seekers to come in because it felt it would make it look good. And then about 10 years ago, Israeli society, which is an inherently very racist society, says, oh, we don't want these black people here. They're having children, they're getting married, they're staying. We want the purity of the Jewish race, or Jewish, whatever the hell it is they call it, and we can't have these people here. So then there was a popular call, a call from people, from society, saying we don't want these people, kick them out, send them home, and that's been the policy ever since. They put them in jails and so on and so forth. The Ethiopian Jews they're being treated terrible because they're black. Ethiopian, I mean, the Sudanese are black too, but they're black asylum seekers, which really have no hold anyway. The Ethiopian Jews were brought there, and they're supposedly Jewish, and so it's a Jewish state, whatever. So you can't really kick them out. But they're treated horribly. There were massive protests by that community maybe a year or so ago, where they were calling out saying, "We're not Palestinians. Why are you treating us like this? Stop and frisk." I mean, everything by the racist, handbook is being done to them. Israel is a racist society. When the Jews from Arab countries immigrated to the young Israel in the 50s, the community in Baghdad, the Jewish community in Baghdad, this was like the elite of the elite. It was one of the most respectable Jewish communities in the world, wealthy and highly educated and highly respected. When they landed, they were sprayed with DDT and sent to camps. Nobody cared if they were doctors, if they were educated, if they're educators, or whatever the case may be. They were Arabs and they were brown. So they were treated horribly to this day. And Jews from all over the Arab world came, from Morocco, from Yemen, from, all of North, the entire Arab world. Jewish people came when Israel was established. And they were treated horribly. And there was actually, a lot of people don't know this, but in the 70s, there was a Black Panther movement, an Israeli version of the Black Panther movement by Jewish people who came from Arab countries, because they were treated so badly. And, they're brown skinned, they're darker skinned than myself. My family comes from Europe, and the basic concept in Israel, just like in any racist society, is that whiteness means privilege. And if you're dark, then you're probably stupid, then you're probably lazy, then you're probably violent. And this they say this about these Jewish communities who came, and like I said, were some of the most respectable communities anywhere. So it's a very racist, it's a racist society through and through.
This is the point too I want to point out to people when we talk about the difference between whether or not it's about race or whether or not it's about religion. Again, the Ethiopian Jews are practicing Judaism. So that right there is a perfect example to point to people and to explain to them, like, obviously there's something more here. It's really disturbing to me when I see politicians like Hakeem Jeffries, Richie Torres, who basically have become shills, like, for the state of Israel, defended at all costs. I don't want to talk about the Palestinian people. And it's really disturbing to see that for those of us living in the United States. It's like, how can you not stand with the Palestinian people, especially for those that are African-American? How can you not stand with them? At one point in time, there was a movement where African-Americans in this country stood with the Palestinian people. And I feel like along the way, that's kind of gotten lost.
Well, I think the people who did stand with the Palestinians were more like Panthers, were more people. These are groups that are very, very progressive anyway. None of them, it was not part of the establishment. Now that these politicians have become part of the establishment, they're drinking the same Kool-Aid. And to be quite honest, it's puzzling. I mean, it's beyond belief. I was in South Africa, and I was interviewed by South African TV. And when I was there, the Jewish community, the Zionist community, brought in an Israeli, who supports, not like me, who is anti-Zionist. And they had us both on the show. And it's available on YouTube, South African TV interview. And at one point, now South Africans can tell, and they've known that Israel is an apartheid state all along. And so the host, who's a Black African, was looking at the two of us, and he says to me, "Can you explain why it's apartheid?" Which, of course, is very easy to do. Then he looks at the other guy and he says, "Can you explain how it's not apartheid?" And for about 20 seconds, this is on live TV, the guy just had his mouth open and he had nothing to say. And then he said, "Oh, well, we can't compare." Then he kind of remembered the talking point. "Oh, we can't compare." That was his talking point. And so the supporting apartheid is absolutely wrong. Supporting racism is absolutely wrong. And for some reason in America, there's a need. American politicians have this need to support Israel, this need to love Israel, this need to send Israel money and weapons. And it's more Americans that need, these American politicians that need to do it for some reason. They have a need to do it than actually, Israel needs the money or .
Can we talk about who the land belongs to, because there are some people that will say, well, the land belongs to Israel. There's some people that will say, well, no, the land actually belongs to the Palestinians originally. There is a graphic that goes around, I think it's pretty viral, where it shows how once upon a time it was all green and it says Palestine. And then as the picture continues, you see less and less green. So it shows that the Palestinian people are being, slowly pushed out.
Yeah, so let me reference two books. One is a book by a Palestinian, a well-known historian called Nur Masalha, and he published a book a few years ago called Palestine: A 4,000-Year History. It's not the biblical Zionist hocus pocus mythology. It's history, pure and simple. And he shows how historically that land was referred to as Palestine going as far back as the Pharaohs and the Babylonians and the Assyrians, all empires which ruled in the region. Herodotus, the father of the Greek father of history, of the science of history, the Greek philosophers who visited the country, everybody called it Palestine. In 1948, Palestine was a thriving, wealthy country. Thriving, well, until 1948, I should say. They were exporting barley from the Nakab, from the south, to the UK to make beer. They were exporting cotton, again, to the British textile industry. They had the Jaffa oranges. They had citrus that they were exporting, olive oil, and on and on and on and on and on. In 1948, suddenly, that in rich history, this entire country that was known as Palestine everywhere. Look at any map, look at literature. It was always called Palestine. Suddenly, all of that was forgotten. The name was changed, and a group of settlers who happened to be Jewish, of colonizers, stole the cities, stole the produce from the fields, stole the money the people had in the banks. See, people had money in the banks, and there were big companies, and there was a lot of wealth. They stole entire cities, with buildings and hospitals and schools, and of course people's homes. They stole a wealthy country, stole it, kicked out almost 1 million people, massacred God only knows how many, because the massacres are still being uncovered till this day. Massacres that took place then are being uncovered and discovered to this day. And they created this myth that this land belongs to the Jews. They created the myth that these Jews came from Europe and made the desert bloom. The Nakab, the southern half of Palestine, called the Nakab. It's a desert, but it's a very fertile desert, most of it. And there are aerial photos that the British took in the early 20th centuries when they occupied Palestine. And you see the entire Nakab, you can see cultivated lands. The Palestinian Bedouin, who are semi-nomadic and live in that part of the country, they're farmers. They engage in agriculture. That part of the desert was in full bloom. Israel destroyed it all. They destroyed it. Now, by the way, the Palestinians who live in that part of the country, who are farmers, are prohibited from engaging in agriculture. Only Israeli settlers, only Jewish Israeli settlements are allowed to engage. And this is, by the way, these are citizens of Israel, Palestinian citizens of Israel. Only Israeli Jews are allowed to engage in agriculture in that part of the country. If I wanted to go tomorrow, I could have a ranch the size of, any size I wanted, and it would all be subsidized. I'd have all the water I want, all the support I want. A Palestinian Bedouin whose land this is cannot engage in agriculture, and their towns are, they don't get water, they don't get electricity, they don't get roads. I mean, they're in terrible condition. And these are Palestinian citizens of Israel. So to claim that somehow, because maybe 3,000 years ago, there was a tribe there called the Hebrews, and today, maybe some Jews are somehow related to that ancient tribe, that today I have the right to kick out Palestinians from their land, take their home, take their water, take their country, and it's somehow legitimate. Again, this is unbelievable. This is incredible.
See, crazy. Yeah, these are the types of things, like, what you just said, like we'll show people like those facts and figures. We'll show people evidence of that. We showed people the video that went viral on Twitter showing that they were cementing like the water like wells and things like that. And some people just look at it and say, oh, why? I don't know about that. I have to look into that. But you know about everything else when it comes to Israel, Palestine? Like it's just, to me, it just seems like I wonder how much of this, especially in reference to politicians and candidates, how much of this is tied to the lobby, so to speak. And that's why some people are saying what they're saying, or they're afraid to speak out in support of the Palestinian people.
Yeah, of course it is. And I said I was going to reference two books. I only referenced one. The other book came out a couple of years ago, and it's called Palestinian Refugees in International Law. And talk about reparations. It describes precisely how much was stolen and the value. I mean, what's the value of a city? It's common, this is Commonwealth, and so on. And so that book is also outstanding, and it demonstrates precisely what was there and what was stolen. But yes, now if we're going to talk about the Israeli lobby, the Zionist lobby, people always, I think, imagine a bunch of people in suits, on Capitol Hill, talking to congressmen and stuff like that, talking to members of Congress and stuff like that. So there's two things to remember or to realize. One is the Zionist lobby has been in action for more than 100 years, long before the state of Israel was established. And they learned very quickly that here in America, all politics is local. So if you run for school board, if you run for city council of the smallest city in America, if you run for mayor, if you run, of course, for police chief, the smallest cities and towns in America, you will be contacted by a local Zionist organization. You will be invited to a junket to go to Israel, all expenses paid. They will make sure that you come back and you are loving Israel all the way, and you will talk about Israel the way they want you to. And so they operate, like I said, very locally. They operate also in education. They make sure that social studies textbooks in middle school describe that country the way they want to describe. And they provide teachers. They go to all the social science conferences. They provide teachers with curricula. They provide them with, glossy material and all the stuff and seminars that the teachers can get continuing education units for, and on and on and on. They work in philanthropy. I lived in San Diego for a long time. The Jacobs family, they're Qualcomm. They're, very wealthy family. They philanthropy, all of anything in San Diego that you look at is Jacobs. It was donated by Jacobs, and it's a Zionist family. So you've got all these areas that are very local, all in which they operate. So by the time somebody runs for office, national office, they've already been indoctrinated. They've already been convinced. And then they're invited to trip, and they meet Netanyahu, and they meet a president, and they meet a general, and they take a trip to, and it goes on and on and on and on and on. The Zionist lobby is far more than what happens in Washington, D.C. They work in the African-American churches. They're in the Latino churches. They are they have these special trips for professionals, for chefs, and for whatever all kinds of other yuppie kind of professions. And they take them on these discovery tours to show them how wonderful and complicated and complex Israel is. They are everywhere, and they are very smart. And we who are on the side of justice, we who care for justice in Palestine, we're so far behind, because what they managed to do is completely dismantle any entity that represents Palestinians. There is no entity that represents Palestinians, certainly not in Washington, D.C., but not in Palestine either. There's nothing.
This sort of reminds me of what happened in the Dominican Republic. And I don't know if you've seen documentaries about this, but Henry Louis Gates did a documentary about this, and where he compared like the Dominican Republic to Haiti, and he went to both countries. And in the Dominican Republic, one of the things that documentary revealed is that they tried to actively erase the African history in the Dominican Republic and just keep the Spanish history. And that's kind of what this reminds me of.
Yeah, I mean, the story of Palestine is, I mean, it's unique in first of all the fact that Americans are giving Israel almost $4 billion a year. I mean, first of all, why give a rich country foreign aid, and never mind why give a racist country foreign aid, but why is America giving Israel $3.8 billion? And that's just the official figure. There's a lot more that goes there, but many more billions that go there. But why? Why is this taking place? And so Americans are complicit unless they stand up against and fight it. Unless they stand up and resist with Palestinians, Americans are complicit. The second thing is the reality in Palestine is that over all of historic Palestine, now I reject the name Israel. I refuse to call it Israel. So, the entire country, which is Palestine, today there are about 12 million people living there. But 7 million of them are Palestinians. The majority of the population in Palestine today are Palestinians, plus you've got millions of Palestinians who are outside in refugee camps, who are not allowed to return, who are denied the right to return to their homes by Israel. So the Palestinians are the majority of the population, and the smaller minority wants the world to think that it's their country, that they have the rights, they need to weaponize themselves all day long, even though they really don't have an enemy. Palestinians never had a military force, so there's no threat. And this is something that Americans have accepted and continue to accept and refuse to break away. And a lot of times I'll talk to people who kind of agree with what I say, but then they say, yeah, but you know what? I still think Israel has a right to exist. I still think we should have a two-state or something. I'm like, why? Why in the world would you agree that an apartheid regime has any kind of legitimacy? Other than if you are a racist.
And how can they have the two-state solution at this point in time when there's too many? I feel like there's way too many settlements. So how could that even be a possibility?
There was never going to be a two-state solution. The two-state solution is a Zionist idea, which has one purpose: legitimizing the initial crime of 1948, the ethnic cleansing and the massacres and the enormous stealing and robbery of a country in 1948, after which Israel the majority of Palestine became Israel. Then when the West Bank was taken, a lot of Israelis, my father included, who was a retired, who was still in uniform, by the way, said, here's a better idea. Here's an idea. Let's let the Palestinians have their own little state in the West Bank and Gaza. But at the same time, Israel began destroying massively, deported by force hundreds of thousands. More than 500,000 Palestinians were thrown out just of the West Bank and Gaza at that time, and building for Jews only. We're not talking about building little farms. We're talking about massively building massive cities. And you're right, there's no more West Bank. Cities and towns and highways and shopping malls and you name it. And Jerusalem has been expanded. The boundaries of East Jerusalem have been expanded and settlements built for Jews only, to a point where it's taken off a whole big chunk of what used to be the West Bank. So there is no West Bank. Anybody who talks about the two-state solution is talking nonsense. And if you just wait and let them try to explain how it's going to work, you'll see that it's nonsense. But why should Palestinians only accept the smaller portion of their own country? Why not the other way around? Maybe the Israeli Jews need to get the smaller portion. The entire idea of separating the country, as opposed to fighting for real equality, one person, one vote, a free democratic Palestine, is really ridiculous.
This is crazy. Like, there's so much. This is so informative. I hope people are learning something that are watching this tonight, because I feel like this is not the mainstream message that most of us get or receive, at least in this country. Do you think as time goes on, and particularly because there has been more investigative journalism taking place in Israel, like people like Max Blumenthal, he's been to Gaza, he reported from there. I think Kim Iverson was there as well at one point. Do you think more Americans are starting to wake up to the plight of the Palestinian people?
On the margins, nowhere near where it needs to be. It's on the margins. I mean, when Americans mobilize they mobilized. Like, in Vietnam, they mobilized around civil rights in the 60s. At one point, they mobilized. Now it's like nobody mobilizes. Nobody gives a damn, And in terms of information, the problem is that all the information is on what's considered the fringe. I'll plug in my book here, the book right behind me here, The General Sun. And so one of the things that I hear from people is that they like to give it to their friends who still think Zionism is a good idea, who still support Israel, because it shows my path from being raised as, being a young, proud Zionist with a father who was a general and a grandfather who was, all these family members who were like really important people in the state, and then taking this journey into Palestine. And so the reader takes the journey with me, and gradually you go through the same experiences I go through. And then you see the conclusion that I reached, and then hopefully the readers, eventually do too. But it's a very helpful tool, because a lot of people struggle with this issue. They hear the facts, they hear the narrative, and they're somehow emotionally still tied to the idea of Israel. And people say this to me all the time. My best friend is Jewish. We've been friends for 30 years. I don't want to bring it up. I don't want to ruin the friendship, or my son-in-law or my neighbor, whatever the case may be. And I'm thinking, what if they were white supremacists? Would you still give them a pass? What if they were Nazis? Would you still give them a pass? I mean, at what level, who gets a pass? Why is it that people who support Israel get a pass? Why is it so? Do Jews get a pass regardless, just because they're Jewish? So there should be no Jewish people in jails. There should be no Jewish people who, held accountable for anything. Why is it that a Jewish person who openly supports violence, terrorism, racism, apartheid gets a pass? Because it's that thing that I just described is called Israel. Why? Why do Israelis get a pass at perpetrating these crimes against humanity? I don't know if people know this. The term crime against humanity was coined. The idea of crimes that are so heinous that they're called crimes against humanity was coined after the Holocaust. After the genocide of the Jews by the Nazis, the world realized that there are such crimes that are so horrific that they're designated as crimes against humanity. The state of Israel is engaged in crimes against humanity. And they get a pass? Why?
That's a very good question. Oh my gosh, Miko. I think everyone should start with, where do you think people should start? Like, if they're trying to find out about this for the first time, do you feel they should start with your book, The General Sun, or you feel like they should start somewhere else and then work their way up?
Well, I'll tell you two more things about my book. I want to plug it, but not too obviously. So when the book came out, Alice Walker, the great and wonderful Alice Walker, wrote that it was the most hopeful thing she'd ever read about Palestine. And then we asked her for a little blurb, and she wrote an entire foreword and dedicated a poem. And it's in the book. So that's one thing. Somebody like that, who, is clearly a great person, a great writer, and also a person of great conscience, that was her take. The other thing is, I hear from a lot of people, I get requests all the time from people, can you send me a book and dedicate it to my friend so-and-so because they're struggling with this? And I think it is. It's a great, because the way the book is written, it's a memoir. It's my personal story. And when you read about all these great family members of mine who were really instrumental in establishing the state of Israel and then operating it for the first few decades, and my loyalty and my sense of duty and my military service and my dad's military and all that kind of stuff. And then you see the break. And then you get into the part, which is the subtitle, The Journey of an Israeli in Palestine. So now we're talking about, so wait a minute, where's Palestine? Because I was born in Israel, I thought, so where's Palestine? And how come I was suddenly, who are these people? I just thought, because we know them, Israelis call them the Arabs of Israel. The Arabs of Israel. So now they're not the Arabs of Israel. Actually, they have their own name, and they have their own nationality, and they have their own kind of unique, independent characteristics and so on. And then at the end, you go, wait a minute, this is Palestine, and this is Palestine, and this used to be Palestine, and this town right here sits on destroyed villages, and that town over there sits on ruins of villages, and the Tel Aviv University sits on ruined villages, and Tel Aviv Airport sits on occupied city of Lid, and what the hell's going on here? And that's the journey that I take. And I meet Palestinians who lost loved ones, Palestinians who had, who were sent many years in prison. My personal story, my sister's little girl was killed in a suicide attack in Jerusalem, and that kind of was what propelled me into this, into this need to engage. And so you go through all of that in the story with me. And it's a lot easier than, hearing somebody just, the politics, just academically discussing it or anything like that. Because you see the landscape, you meet the people, you see their homes through the story.
One more question for you, Miko. How are you received when you go back to Israel now that you've written these books? How are you received by the community?
Well, like I said, I don't call it Israel. So I go to Palestine. I go there quite a bit. I have family there, still a rather large family. My mother's still alive. And I have a lot of work that I do there. I mean, my work involves a lot of travel. I'm going there a lot. And so work with my Palestinian brothers and sisters. How I'm received depend. I mean, my family loves me because we're family. And so we try to, just do family stuff because it's a very difficult conversation to have. Israelis, by and large, don't want to have this conversation with somebody like me. It pushes them to a point where they're feeling really uncomfortable. So I'll give you an example. I was interviewed a couple of times by Israeli TV. And once I was actually in Palestine. One time they came here, but once I was actually in Palestine and they followed me around. And at the end, they're pretty shocked. They spent a few days, I told them what I do. And I said, if you want to come with me, you can come with me if you want. Which for them was, oh my God, we have to go to East Jerusalem. Oh my God, we have to go to all these places. We have to bring guns. We have to bring guards. And so I made it clear. I said, if I see one gun, I'm out. I'm not part of this. But anyway, at the end, they said, we agree with you, especially the producers and kind of the TV people. They're kind of a little more progressive. At least they think they are. And I said, we agree with you 95%. And I said, damn that 5%. I wonder what that 5% is. And that 5% is giving up the privilege. Understanding that actually it's not even giving up the privilege. It's sharing the privilege because Palestine is a rich country. There's plenty there to go around for everyone. It's giving up the privilege and sharing it with everybody so that the Palestinians have the same privileges, the same rights as we Israelis do. And that's the 5%. So these are these very progressive Israelis that agree with me 95%. But you know what? Taking it to the point where the actually Palestinian refugees are allowed to return, taking it to the point where there's actually justice, where there's actually real equality, where there's actually a democracy, because the country's never been a democracy, that's going too far for them.
One more question, Miko. I know I said one more, but one more question for reals, because I don't want to forget about this one. Yeah. Boycott, divestment, and sanctions. Do you believe this is the way to truly help the Palestinian people?
Without a doubt. Without any doubt. There must be boycotts. Now, people think, boycott, divestment, it means we don't buy, Israeli avocados or, whatever. Yeah, that's important. Don't buy the Israeli avocados, of course. Boycott means we have to work so that the Olympic Committee does not allow Israeli teams to compete. Boycott means that Israeli institutions are banned from participating, whether it's academically, culturally, politically, diplomatically, sporting events, out, just the way it was done with apartheid South Africa. The Olympics in Tokyo Olympics, there was a judo practitioner from Algeria. And when he came up, it was his turn. And can you imagine, an Olympic athlete? You know how hard you worked. Can you imagine? And then you get to that point, right? We're actually at the Olympics. And he had to compete. Fathi Nourin was named. Fathi Nourin. And he had to compete against an Israeli. And he refused. He was thrown out of the Olympics. He was thrown out of the International Judo Federation. He's prohibited from ever competing. He gave up his entire career. And me, I had a career in martial arts. To me, he won the match without even stepping on the mat. Because in life, I think in general, but certainly in martial arts, moral issues are more important than, winning a game or winning a match. Now, here's the problem. Good for him. I mean, he's a hero. There's no question. He should not have had to do it. The Olympic Committee had to make sure that there's no Israeli team participating because they are representing an apartheid state. They're representing a state that is engaged in apartheid. Period. It's not up to the individual athlete who worked so hard to get there. Good for him for making the sacrifice, but that shouldn't be he shouldn't have to make that sacrifice. He shouldn't be made to be placed in that position. That's what I'm talking about. Sanctions, there should be severe sanctions against Israel. Severe sanctions. More than that, I say the Sixth Fleet that is situated in the Mediterranean should go to the shores of Gaza and make sure the siege on Gaza is lifted immediately, and that there's a no-fly zone so Israeli planes can't keep flying and bombing Gaza, and that the people of Gaza receive the water and the food and the medical care that they need finally. Why are 2 million people locked up in a concentration camp? When Israel bombs Gaza, you can see it from the beaches in Tel Aviv. The beaches in Tel Aviv are these really fun, wonderful beaches. You can see the smoke. You think people stop going to the beach or playing volleyball or getting drinks or eating?
Nope.
Not for 1 second, So that's what BDS is. That's what boycott is. That's what sanctions are. Avocados, oranges, all that stuff, that's important, Israeli products. But usually they hide it. Now they hide it. If it's made in Israel, they change it. They say made in Greece. So they do all this kind of stuff, which shows that it's working. But it has to be much more robust. We have to talk about FIFA kicking out Israel. We have to talk about universities and on and on and on. Like I said, that's what BDS is about. And it is absolutely, it makes, first of all, it makes sense, but absolutely is a crucial tool.
Thank you so much, Miko. Thank you so much for coming on. Again, where can people follow you to find your work?
Well, MikoPeled.com has almost all my stuff. There's a Miko Peled podcast, a small little podcast that I put out with interviews with people. It's all about Palestine. I write for various, but everything ends up, and I'm on all over social media, so my stuff always ends up, so people can follow me there. It's easy to find my book. It's a very catchy name, so if you put General Son, Miko Peled, it's it comes up. And now I've been on your show, so that's so they can find me here too.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Miko. Thank you so much for coming on.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, guys, I hope you learned something there, because I'm sorry, but we need to talk about this topic more, and you need to hear from other people, not just me, but people who do have experience, more experience in that field and have the personal experience. He's from there, right? So he knows a lot about it. Miko's also been on Kim Iverson's show. He's also been on Katie Halper's show. Very, very knowledgeable about this. So yes, you should check out his book as well. I'll go ahead and take that comment on Rockfin Corey. Looks like that's Roger. Thank you so much for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Oh, he is right about the Israel lobby within the Black church. Justice for Israel is what a Black preacher shouted out of nowhere when we were protesting our county legislator last year for rent hikes. I was like, oh, okay, where did that come from? Totally hear you, Roger. Totally hear you. I'm going to go to some of these comments here as well. Thank you so much for the super sticker. Dave says, boop, boop. What's going on, Oz? Thank you so much for the super sticker. Thank you, Roger. Oh, what do you know? Race trumping class. There you go. Thank you, Marvin. Miko have tried to reach out to RFK Jr., educate him. Well, I don't know if you heard what Miko said, but Miko said that this guy is not going to have this conversation with people. That's what Miko was saying. So chances are he probably has tried to have this conversation. What's going on? JB says this sounds so much like what the British colonialists did to American indigenous people. It does. Thank you, Malika. That's why I am proud to be Algerian. Well, all right. And thank you so much for the super sticker, Zen Masters Black Basketball Channel, official Sab gang. Thank you so much for that. If you have not had a chance to do so, guys, go ahead and smash that like button. That helps me out with the algorithm there. Thank you so much. And we're going to go ahead and shout out Sabby patrons, and then we'll go ahead and dive into our other stories tonight. Some pretty interesting things to talk about. I'm pretty sure you guys are curious to hear, probably curious to hear what I have to say about this GOP primary debate, because that was a doozy. Yikes. All right. Quick shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. I really do appreciate it. If you are interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate Sabinators, Sabsters, there's also Sabbies, and of course, members. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker as well. And I want to give a special shout out to a new Sabby patron. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Milton Crow. Dun, dun, dun. Thank you. Thank you guys so much. Really do appreciate all of that jazz. All righty. Let's go ahead and show that beautiful thumbnail, guys, so you can see what else we're going to discuss tonight. For some reason, today feels like Friday. I don't know why. Maybe that's just me. All right. Tonight, we are discussing the GOP debate recap. And you'll see there's Nikki Haley, Vivek, and of course, Ron DeSantis there. If you have not had a chance to do so, go ahead and take that poll, because I want you to tell me, who do you think, based out of those listed in the poll, is actually going to be some type of a challenge or whatever for Donald Trump? Be honest. We're also going to discuss Cornel West goes off. Cornel West on Meet the Press. This is huge. I think he really did the damn thing. And this is really what you have to do when you go onto these types of shows. And I think he really did that. And Maura Healey, my governor, used to be Attorney General. She's also in the news because of controversial matter in reference to fossil fuels, which is actually pretty hypocritical coming from Maura Healey, if you know about her past when she was Attorney General. So we're going to dive into that. And of course, Miko was just here to discuss Israel and Palestine. We have time. I will try to finish Washington ballot initiative tonight as well. Okay. Let's go ahead and get started with this story about Cornel West. Now, first of all, before I bring up the interview, I want you to understand how significant this is. Cornel West, third-party candidate. He's been on CNN. He's been on Fox News. I'm not sure about MSNBC. But he has also now been on Meet the Press. And I really do believe that this is the difference when you have a third-party candidate that is popular, that people know, versus when you have a candidate that people don't know, they haven't heard of before. Mark my words, had Jesse Ventura run in 2020, third party as well, he would also be getting this same type of attention, because it's kind of hard to ignore the people that are well known. It's kind of hard to ignore a Jesse Ventura. It's kind of hard to ignore Cornel West, right? So this is exactly what we wanted when we talk about breaking away from the duopoly. We want someone who's going to get the media attention. They can't ignore him like they've done other third-party candidates. So, of course, they questioned Dr. West. Why are you doing this, Dr. West? You might help out Donald Trump. Why are you doing this? Well, I think that Dr. West delivered a great response. Let's get into it.
The third rail of a third-party ticket. I'll talk to Green Party candidate Cornel West about his bid for the White House amid growing anxiety among Democrats that a third-party challenger like him could spoil President Biden's re-election chances in 2024. But first, a special programming announcement. Make sure to tune in tomorrow night for a Meet the Press special following the first Republican debate with live analysis, reporting, interviews, and much, much more. That's at 11 p.m. Eastern right here on NBC News Now. We'll be right back with more Meet the Press Now, live from Milwaukee.
Oh, sorry, here we go.
Won't be the only big names on your ballot next November. As we've reported, the group No Labels is gaining ballot access across the country and is considering running a moderate third-party candidate if President Biden and former President Trump are the Democratic and Republican Party nominees. Joe Manchin and John Huntsman have both been floated as possible independent candidates on that ticket. And Cornel West, professor, political activist, and former Bernie Sanders presidential backer, is seeking the Green Party's presidential nomination. And joining me now is Green Party presidential candidate and Union Theological Seminary professor, Cornel West. Thank you so much, Professor West, for being here. Really appreciate it.
What a blessing. And I salute you in this wonderful new job, so very well deserved. It's beautiful to see you flowering and flourishing, I should say, from Harvard Yard to now Meet the Press. That's beautiful.
See, it's really hard to clap back at that. That's the thing. Cornel West is friendly. Like, obviously, he's respectful. It doesn't matter what show he goes on to. He respects the people that he's talking to. He's not, calling them names or anything like that. But it makes it really difficult for you to dislike him, even if you're on corporate media. That's important. Look at her. She's smiling. Right? Let's continue.
Thank you, Professor West. I appreciate that so much. Thank you. And thank you for being here. We do want to talk to you about your candidacy, which has gotten a lot of attention. And I want to start off by asking you about it in this context. Your longtime political ally, Senator Bernie Sanders, he's not a Democrat, but he did, as you know, run twice in the Democratic presidential primary. So let me just put the question to you. Why have you decided to run as a third party candidate rather than a Democrat challenging President Biden?
Yes, Bernie Sanders, as you know, is my very dear brother. I have a deep love for him. We have disagreement at this historical moment. I'm thoroughly convinced that neither party is speaking to the pressing needs of poor and working people. And so the two-party system itself is becoming an impediment for the flowering of American democracy. We've got too many fellow citizens, 63% living paycheck to paycheck. And many of us know exactly what that means, no matter how big or small our check actually is. And so in that sense, I must say that it's hard to view oneself as a spoiler when there's increasing rot in the system with two parties connected to big money, Wall Street, Silicon Valley, and militarism abroad. And we need, and really the anthem of Black people, lift every voice. We need many, many more voices, and the two parties that we have are too narrow at this point.
Did you notice what he did? He criticized both parties at the same time and connected both of them to the military industrial complex and the corporate greed. That's how you do it. You show the similarities, especially if you're a third party independent. You come out there and you show the similarities between the two parties. Hey, these parties aren't as much different as you guys think. They're similar in certain ways, and let me explain to you how. Wrap it all up as corruption. They're both corrupt. It's hard to push back on that because where's the lie? You can't push back and say, oh, no, they don't support the military, because they do. You can't push back and say, oh, no, they don't take corporate money, because they do. And those are things that everybody knows for the most part, right? Whether you vote or you don't vote. So that part is important to explain and to differentiate yourself between Bernie Sanders without smearing Bernie Sanders. So Cornel West definitely took this approach different than I would have, because I probably would have just been like, yeah, Bernie just does not have the guts to do what needs to be done, But Cornel West is able to do this in such a way to say, well, yes, that is someone that is a friend of mine, but I have to do what I feel is right. And just because we were on that Bernie campaign together, that doesn't mean that I'm going to follow every move that Bernie Sanders did. At the end of the day, he's his own person. And I think it's important to make that distinction. Let's continue.
Well, I'm curious because you say this is a moment where you're not necessarily seeing eye to eye with your good friend, Senator Bernie Sanders. Have you spoken to him about your candidacy? As you know, he's already endorsed President Biden.
No, we've had no dialogue. I can feel his love at a distance. I hope he can feel my love at a distance. But no, we've had no dialogues about it. Not at all. And as you know, I was very close to him for two campaigns. And I just don't think Democratic Party treated him fairly. They didn't treat him justly. Democratic Party was too anti-democratic. And I think both establishments in the Republican Party and in the Democratic Party, they are undergoing a slow erosion. I think one of the reasons why you get a Trump is because the Democratic Party establishment has eroded. I think you're going to see it in many ways in the debate tomorrow night. You know, we just don't have the high quality. So you end up with a lot of Pied Piper language at Trump, but he's in so many ways beneath mediocrity, God bless him. And then with Biden, you've got milquetoast mediocrity. Where are the great visionary statespersons that come in and intervene as this country is undergoing polarization and gangsterization? In the name of integrity, honesty, decency, and generosity, we have got to have new voices on the scene. That's why I'm running for president.
Let me interject here for just a second. Did you notice what else he just did there? He explained to the American people, and a lot of people watch Meet the Press. My grandma used to watch this too. He explained to the American people that the Democratic Party gave you Donald Trump. And I think more people need to hear that, because let's be real. We cannot forget the American voters that voted for Barack Obama twice and then turned around and voted for Donald Trump. And those voters do exist. And you have to ask, why would that be? Why would they turn from Obama, who's Democrat, to Donald Trump? They were complete opposites, but it's because the needs of the American people were not being met. And we had 2 terms of Barack Obama. So that needs to be said. And he didn't even have to say Barack Obama's name, but let's be real. We can all put the two together and we all know who was president before Donald Trump. So you got to make that connection. And I think that was important for him to make that connection. Also, something else that I noticed that she tried to do. Have you spoken to Bernie Sanders since? Has anything? He's your good friend. You haven't heard from him. But notice how Cornel West responded. That was an easy chance for someone like Cornel West to be like, no, I haven't heard from him. Yeah, I can't believe he endorsed Joe Biden. He should be contacting me. You can take this in different ways. But this is something I think that Cornel West is really good at. Not everyone is good at this. I'm just going to keep it real, because it's easy to fall into that trap and to start saying negative things about Bernie Sanders. Maybe that's not really relevant at that point in time. But what Dr. West is able to do, he's able to answer the question without throwing Bernie Sanders under the bus. You see the difference? Because if he would have thrown Bernie Sanders under the bus, which is what I think she might have been trying to get him to do, then it kind of makes you look some kind of way after you just called him your friend. Next thing you know, there's more drama in the press. Cornel West calls Bernie Sanders a this and a this and a that. So he knows how to answer those types of questions the right way. It's kind of hard to come back with that.
Let me ask you about your past position. In 2004, you signed a letter of former Ralph Nader advisors urging progressives in swing states to vote for John Kerry. I'm going to read you a little bit of this letter that you signed. Quote, "This year, we urge support for Kerry Edwards in all swing states, even while we strongly disagree with Kerry's policies on Iraq and other issues. For people seeking progressive social change in the United States, removing George W. Bush from office should be the top priority in the 2004 presidential election. Progressive voters for John Kerry in swing states may prove decisive in attaining this vital goal."
Let me pause here for a second. So now what she's trying to do is she's trying to make it seem like it's a bad thing that he evolved. People change. I've changed politically over the years. Hell, I voted for Barack Obama. A lot of you watching voted for Barack Obama. She's going all the way back to, this is 2004, September 14, 2004. She's going all the way back to 2004. And that was almost over 20 years ago. So you're not allowed to have any type of political evolution within almost 20 years. You see what they do? Like, this is what we have to realize. And I've seen people do this on social media too. And I think this is something that needs to change. Not everybody is going to move politically when we move. Some people may be latecomers. Some people may be ahead of you. But what you don't do is you don't go back and shame them and say, but in 2004, you said this politically. It was almost 20 years ago. You know what happens in that span of a time? People have kids. People get married. People move. People change careers within almost 20 years. So much can happen within your life and your political thinking in that amount of time. But this is supposed to be a gotcha moment, but it's not really a gotcha moment. Listen to this.
If you believed that in 2004, Dr. West, how do you rationalize your third-party candidacy this time around?
Well, it's a wonderful question because, as you know, I supported Brother Biden, given my profound disagreements with Biden as architect of mass incarceration, as supporter of invasion and occupation of Iraq. Why? Because I was thoroughly convinced that what the Republicans were presenting was so dangerous. But the sad thing is now is that as dangerous as a second Trump term would be, if we don't break out of the corporate duopoly, we're going to be doing this for the next 10, 20, and 30 years. And I don't think the American project can withstand it. This shift from Democrats to Republicans, Democrats feeding the Republicans, Republicans feeding the Democrats, and yet poor people, working people, finding themselves pushed to the margins. It could be Cop City, both parties support. It could be expansion of military budget, both parties support. It could be policies advantageous to Wall Street, both parties support. And as you know, this is the 60th anniversary of Brother Martin Luther King's great speech. And I've always viewed myself as my own humble calling, trying to keep alive the great legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., Fannie Lou Hamer, Ella Baker, and Diane Nash. And that tradition has to continue on and on. I think of Les McCann's great classic, compared to what, 1969? Compared to what at this point with these parties? Let's try something new.
And I have to say here as well, this whole idea that now is not the time, we need to wait. No. We could get Trump. If not Trump, it'll be someone else. And they'll continue to use this type of rhetoric. No. Might get DeSantis, might get Trump, might get Mike Pence, there's always going to be a might get someone else. But it's just, I think back to the civil rights movement, and I'm trying to think about what would Martin Luther King have said to the people who said, no, we can't boycott now. We can't march in the streets now. We can't allow ourselves to be beaten, to be jailed. We can't deal with all this. Not now is not the time. We need to wait a little bit. Where would we all be today? Where would we be? Where would we be if it wasn't for, we talk about the RBN chapters that we all started. We talk about mutual aid. We talk about community organizing. What would have happened if the Black Panthers, if people like Fred Hampton would have listened to the naysayers who told him, no, now is not the time? Because here's the thing, guys, there's always going to be a naysayer, and there's always going to be the people that tell you now is not the time. And the people that come to you and tell you now is not the time, those are people speaking from fear. They're not speaking from empowerment. They're not speaking from encouragement. They're not trying to encourage you. They're not trying to uplift you. They're not trying to push your idea forward. They are afraid. And so they are trying to push their fear onto you. And what do we do with that? What do we do when people try to push their fears onto us? We push back, and we push back harder, and we shake it off. Don't let people do that to you. Do not let people try to put their fear onto you, because then you just end up with a mass of fearful people who sit by and years later look back and say, man, maybe we should have gone ahead and gave it a try. Maybe we should have done it. Don't fall into that. You don't want to be the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. So there'll always be the now is not the time people. There's always going to be people who are afraid. But you don't think during the civil rights movement, those activists, some of them weren't afraid? You don't think the people who got on the buses, the freedom riders who got on the buses, you don't think they were afraid driving through the South during that time that they may be beaten or they could be killed? You don't think they were afraid? You cannot let fear control you to the point where you will not try to do something that is challenging because you are afraid of what is going to happen on the other side. And I'm speaking from personal experience. You cannot let that happen. Let's continue.
Dr. West, as you know, though, if you look back throughout history, third-party candidates have at times made the difference in presidential elections, including in 2016, when in some key states, Jill Stein, for example, seemed to make a difference. Would you be okay if at the end of the day, the vote totals came back, you stayed through the entire race, and it was clear that your candidacy helped deliver former President Trump another term in office?
Hillary Clinton was the difference. You know, I don't like people blaming people like Jill Stein and third party and independent candidates. If Hillary Clinton had actually campaigned in the Rust Belt and spoke to the people like they were people and not like they were beneath her, maybe those people would have voted for Hillary. But let's be real. All these pundits who are blaming people like Jill Stein and any other third party candidates, they need to put that blame right back on to Hillary Clinton. All the people who blame like Ralph Nader, they need to put that blame right back on to, who was the guy? Oh, Al Gore, right? Because the thing is this, if you are strong and you are a strong candidate and your message is reaching a lot of people, then the third party and the independent candidate are not going to affect you anyway. Were there not third party and independent candidates when Barack Obama ran in 2008 and he won by a landslide, right? Let's remember, it is Hillary Clinton's fault that she did not find a way to reach working class people, poor people, and honestly, even some of the black people that said they were going to show up for Hillary when it came time to vote, stayed home. So when you go on to talk shows and you go on to like the Breakfast Club and you try to pretend like you're down with the homies and you say stupid shit like, I got that hot sauce in my bag, people see right through you. When you ignore people that live in these industrial towns that the country has forgotten about and they have had their jobs taken away from them because of policies like NAFTA, and you ignore those people, or when you do get to speak to those people, you talk down to those people as though they are beneath you, you are the reason that you lost. Not Jill Stein, not all these other people who were in the race. That was solely on Hillary Clinton, because she entered that campaign with such a sense of snobbery. And there's a sense of, she's prudish in a way, that how dare she have to be on the debate stage with Donald Trump? How dare he even make it to that point with all of my experience and my education and my knowledge? This shouldn't even be happening. That attitude is what turns a lot of people off from liberals and the Democratic Party. That attitude. So if you ignore working people, they'll remember to ignore you when it's time to vote.
Well, the vast number of voters who would vote for a Green Party and myself either would not vote at all or would never, ever, ever vote for Biden or Trump. And that's very important to keep in mind, because there's this narrative, I think it's a false narrative, thinking that somehow they're choosing between Biden and myself. No, not really. They've given up on Biden. What is it now? 48% of our precious fellow citizens do not vote at all, my dear sister. That's not a good sign in a democracy that's already in decay. That's not a good symptom of a democracy already experiencing a kind of decadence. We've got to bring new people in, and neither party is really interested in speaking to that 48% that is given up on American democracy.
100%. And I'm glad he said to her that the people who are going to vote for like Cornel West or any third party candidate, those people are not going to vote for a Trump or a Biden anyway. We have to continue to say that, because mainstream media, they continue to say their narrative that those candidates are giving the race over to Trump. So we have to continue to say our message. We have to continue to stay on course, let them know we wouldn't vote for those candidates anyway.
What do you say to your fellow progressives, AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Senator John Fetterman, who've expressed their real concerns about a third-party candidacy? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says, quote, "It's very difficult to square the very real threat of a Republican presidency with the risk of giving up the very small margin of electoral votes needed to ensure that President Biden wins." John Fetterman says, "I fundamentally believe that you don't mess around with the kinds of highest stakes we're dealing with. Can you just imagine what a second term of Trump would be? It's all going to be about revenge."
You know what this shows you about AOC and John Fetterman, I told you guys, is not progressive. I wish they would stop calling him that. But what this shows you about AOC and John Fetterman is that these people, they're just regular Democrats. That's it. That's all they are. They talked a lot when Trump was in office, but the moment that Joe Biden won that White House, they fell right in line. That's all it is. These people are not going to fight for you. These people are not going to fight. AOC won't even show up to a march for Medicare for all. John Fetterman, these people are not going to be out in the streets with us. When a real revolution happens in this country, and I do believe it will happen, it will not be televised. But I'll tell you one thing, I wouldn't expect those people to be there. I wouldn't expect those people to be out in the streets. Cornel West has been out in the streets. Cornel West has been there to protest against issues, even when the issues were not popular. And he's been arrested during protests because of that. AOC and John Fetterman, nah.
What do you say to your fellow progressives who are expressing deep concerns about a third-party candidacy?
Well, I think one thing to keep in mind is that 1 out of 8 of the voters for Trump voted for Bernie Sanders. See, the Trump followers are not homogeneous and monolithic. If you can speak to their pain, if you can speak to their frustration, they will never vote for Democrats. But many of them would be open to those who are speaking to their needs. They don't have to follow the Pied Piper, the neo-fascist Pied Piper with Trump. A new vision, a different alternative can convince a significant number of them. And so, again, I'm resisting the notion that somehow it's just a matter of myself and Brother Biden that people are choosing between. No, we've got large numbers of non-voters who are interested, especially young people. Look at the percentage of young people. Only 20-some% participate at all. I want to speak to those young folk. I want to try to galvanize their energy.
Especially in the primary campaigns. I don't know if everyone's aware, but in the primary elections, whether it's Democrat primary or Republican primary, younger people are more likely to sit those out. Bernie Sanders changed some of that. Like when Bernie was running, that kind of energized a lot of younger people like, oh, I'm going to go vote in a primary for like the first time in my life, right? But for usually the most part, younger people are more likely to sit those out.
Dr. West, I'm getting a hard rap, so just yes or no. Are you in this until the very end, or is there a chance you'll reconsider at some point and potentially drop out?
Well, I am a jazz man, you know that, but I intend to be in it to the very end because it's not just about It's not about this particular election only. It's about a larger movement. We've got to break the two-party system, and to do it is now. And if we don't do it now, we'll find ourselves back and forth with this swing between the fascists on the one hand and the neoliberals on the other.
All right. Professor Cornel West,
See, she couldn't push back. You guys notice that? How can you push back on that? We have to break away from this system.
thank you so much for your time and your perspective. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Salute you. Salute you.
See, she's smiling like she knows what's up. She knows what's up. Now, I want to talk about something here. I want to show you something. I think I can play it on here. Yeah, I think I can play it on here. I want to show you a Trump supporter. Now, remember what Cornel West just said about Trump supporters, not being homogenous, right? So we want to be careful about putting people in boxes, right? All right, let me show you something. We are taking people out of the box. And Corey, I forgot to put this in there, but I'm doing it now. So I'm sorry. I wasn't going to do this one at first, but I changed my mind. Sorry. Welcome to Sabby Live, where anything can change. All right. I want you to hear from a Trump supporter because we don't want to put people in boxes, right? Listen to this. This guy wants to vote for Trump. Listen.
I'm here to support President Trump. You want to know why I'm here to support President Trump? Because they done did black men like this for decades. Make up charges and put them, so I know Trump is innocent. I support Trump against this corrupt, two-tiered justice system. That's why I'm here to show my support as a black man for Trump. And I'm wearing my shirt, Niggas for Trump 2024, and I mean that.
Now, does he look like your average Trump supporter? See why you can't put people in boxes? Let him finish. He gets funny later on.
What do you think about the indictments?
Oh, it's a bunch of bullshit. It's going around the country. Fannie Willis, she went to school with my sister. She's full of shit. She was full of shit then. So she's a puppet for the white liberal that is controlling everything. She's in front, but the white liberal back there pulling those strings, telling her what to do. That's what I think about her, making a fool of herself.
Do you think it's going to help his election?
Of course it is. It's going to elevate him all the way. I think we should make Trump king. That's how I feel. We should make him king.
Wouldn't that be kind of like communistic?
No, that's nowhere near communist. Now, we're just going to make him king, but we still got our freedoms and rights and everything. He for that. Yeah, Trump for king 2024.
That's actually my URL. I own that URL.
Funny, huh? So again, they're not all the same. All Trump voters aren't the same, and we can't just continue to put people in boxes. Just something to think about. Go ahead and smash that like button, guys, if you haven't had a chance to do so. Thank you very much. I'll go to some of the comments here. Natalie says, Dr. West disarms with charm and respect. Matthew says, this chat lost all faith in Ron DeSantis. I haven't seen some of the comments about Ron DeSantis. When we get into that story, it should be interesting. That's funny, though. You guys got a lot of nicknames for Ron DeSantis. I'll take the comments on Rockfin, Corey. He has a new nickname like every week, I feel like. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Sam. Thank you for genteel conversation, sorely needed. And thank you for the tip, JVB. Thanks, Sabby, for inviting Miko. Really appreciate this conversation. You are welcome. Chong, chong, chong. Our next story shows a little bit of hypocrisy. Governor Maura Healey, she was our former attorney general here in Massachusetts. When she was running for governor, I tried to warn people that Maura Healey is not going to be what you think. Yes, she is a Democrat. She's very corporate. She does not hide that. But one of the things about her is that she did tend to give the impression, at least to voters, so to speak, that she would fight back in reference to climate issues. Well, recently, Maura Healey was confronted by climate activists on Martha's Vineyard, or this is Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket Island. Nantucket Island. Now, these activists are not happy with Maura Healey because, again, she ran on one thing and now she's doing something else. Apparently now she does not want to stop new fossil fuel projects, but she ran on this big whole I'm going to protect climate type of speech. And when you see her past, you're going to see the hypocrisy that's happening now with Maura Healey. Now, this is coming from Climate Defiance. You should follow them on Twitter. We just swarmed a major fundraiser on Nantucket Island benefiting Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey. We demanded she ban new fossil fuel projects. She refused, so we shut down her whole event. She fled. Let's see what this is all about. So this is Maura Healey here in the blue dress next to the woman here in the white shirt and the white pants. This is Maura Healey here. Watch this.
Excuse me, Governor Healey, I'm sorry to interrupt. We're in the midst of a climate emergency.
What's your name?
My name is Matt.
Nice to meet you,
I'm
Matt.
20 years old and you're throwing my future. The state of Massachusetts is building 10 new fossil fuel infrastructure projects right now.
Hey, Corey, can we make it louder? I forgot this video is kind of, the volume on this one is low. Sorry, guys. Anything can happen live. All right, cool. Let's bring it back in.
We're in the midst of a climate emergency.
What's your name?
My name is Matt.
Nice to meet you,
I'm
Matt.
20 years old and you're throwing my future. The state of Massachusetts is building 10 new fossil fuel infrastructure projects right now. We need you to ban new fossil fuel infrastructure right now. Will you commit to doing that? Yes or no?
Let's talk about that, okay?
Let's talk about it. Yes or no?
Let's talk about that. There's a huge transition that we're undergoing, and there's a lot of work to do. But let me tell you.
It's really a yes or no answer. Like, this really is a yes or no answer. Like, it's not even, hold on, let me fix this real quick. I figured I gotta play it.
Excuse me, Governor Healey, I'm sorry to interrupt. We're in the midst of a climate emergency.
What's your name?
My name is Matt.
Nice to meet you,
I'm
Matt.
20 years old and you're throwing my future. The state of Massachusetts is building 10 new fossil fuel infrastructure projects right now. We need you to ban new fossil fuel infrastructure right now. Will you commit to doing that? Yes or no?
Let's talk about that, okay?
Let's talk about it. Yes or no?
Let's talk about that. There's a huge transition that we're undergoing, and there's a lot of work to do. But
That's a typical brush off tactic that politicians do. Michelle Wu does this too. Mayor Wu, that they do when they don't really want to answer your question. They'll say, let's talk about that, or call my office, contact my office. And then you do those things, you contact their office, and they never put you through. You never hear from them again. That's why your only way of really getting some type of response out of them is to ask them in person, because that's what happens when you call their office or let's talk about that.
let me tell you, and I
The first step of the
appreciate
transition is to ban new fossil fuels. Will you ban new fossil fuel infrastructure?
I think it's enough.
Matt. Guys, I appreciate it's democracy.
And fossil fuels, Maura. And fossil fuels. And fossil fuels, Maura. And fossil fuels.
You've assaulted us.
How did I assault you? There is no future. I don't have the fossil fuel.
You see this woman's face? Let's go back. I'm sorry, but her, for me, look at her reaction. Yes, Terry, you're correct. Terry says, y'all notice not one black person there. Nope. And you won't see us represented. But look at this.
Fuels, Maura. And fossil fuels. And fossil fuels, Maura. And fossil fuels.
You've assaulted us.
How did
You assaulted. So she's telling the climate activists that they assaulted them. What did they do? This is angry rich people. Angry rich people. You said words I disagree with. You assaulted us. That's what this is. Watch it though. Wait for it.
I assault you? There is no future. I don't have.
Look at her. Here she goes. Campaign Karen. Let's bring her back. We got to give her a nickname, guys. We got to give her a nickname. Campaign Karen. Get out. Get out.
No future. I don't have. The fossil fuel industry bought you out. The fossil fuel industry gave you $50,000. And fossil fuels, more and fossil fuels.
Here comes the snobby liberal. I've been alive longer than you, and I know more than you. This guy right here. See this guy right here on the left? I've been a climate activist for longer than you've been alive. Here comes the liberal elitism.
Longer than you're alive. Fossil fuels. And fossil fuels.
Touch you.
And fossil fuels.
You've hurt your cause.
So now, Mr. I know more than you because I've been alive longer than you, and I'm Mr. Snooty says you've hurt your cause. You've hurt your cause. No, what hurt the cause is when you have a politician that runs on those issues and says they're going to fight against those types of issues, and they choose to actually just put themselves in the same pockets with the fossil fuel industry. So Maura Healey, you ran on these things, but now you want to sit here and say, oh, let's talk about it. Or it's complicated. Those are my favorite terms, right? The younger generation is not going to put up with this. The Gen Z kids, like I'm a millennial and we've had some of our fire too, but the younger kids, they're not going to put up with this. This is their future. This is their future. So my thing is, if you didn't intend to do it, don't run on it. Don't run on it. Maura got paid.
No new fossil fuels. We've spoken to her before. And she's ignored us.
You have no idea how to get things done. You have no idea how to get things done.
We're afraid.
Here comes Mr. Rich Snobby Dude. You have no idea how to get things done. You have no idea how to get things done.
Because of our lives are going to end.
My lives too. We're all the same age.
No, we're not. I'm 20. How are you?
I have kids that are 9.
Okay.
You have absolutely no idea how to get things done.
Can you tell me what are you doing to help them?
new fossil fuels.
What are you doing to
I
help
have
them?
solar everything. I have solar in my
Is your
house.
individual act going to help us? No.
I have solar everything. What does that have to do with the fossil fuels? What does that have to do with the governor not banning new fossil fuels when she said that she would do it? Nobody's talking about your house, Bougie Pete. What are we going to call him? We got to give him a nickname. We had Campaign Karen. We'll call him Bougie Pete.
Act of someone in power is going
If you had half
to.
a brain, you would understand
We
how
have
to get
no
things done.
money. Maura has power, and she can help save us, but she's
your
not.
rudeness prevents you
We're
from
gonna
talking
die.
to her.
Who cares how rude we are?
I don't mind
And
if
the
you
people in
die.
that-
You see this? This is what I wanted to show you guys. This is exactly what I wanted to show you. This is rich, snobby liberals in Massachusetts showing their whole ass. This is exactly what I wanted you to see. This is the whole thing. It's not really about red versus blue. It's these snobby people, rich snobby people. And what the hell is this guy wearing? What is this? A plaid jacket and pants. Are these polka dot pants? What is this? This guy said he did not care if she died. Look, let's go back. Watch. Mister, I have solar everything.
We've spoken to her before. She's ignored us.
You have no idea how to get things done. You have no idea how to get things done.
We're afraid because of our lives are going to end.
My lives too. We're all the same age.
And no.
We're all the same age. How the hell is she the same age as him? You have no idea how to get things done. You notice, like, people like him, they'll say that. They'll pick at you and say you don't know how to get things done. Maybe instead of picking at them and saying you don't know how to get things done, maybe you sit down with this young woman and show her how to get things done. Maybe lead by example. I have solar everything.
We're not. I'm 20. How are you?
I have kids that are 9.
Okay.
You have absolutely no idea how to get things done.
Can you tell me what are you doing to help them?
new fossil fuels.
What are you doing to
I have
help them?
solar everything. I have solar in my
Is your
house.
individual act going to help us? No, the act of someone in power is going
If you had half
to.
a brain, you would understand
We
how
have
to get
no.
things
You hear the insults? You hear these snobby, elite, liberal insult? This is how people talk here. Not everybody. But you see, if you had half a brain, let's insult her intelligence. Let's insult her organizing skills by saying you don't know how to get things done. This is how they talk.
Money. Maura has power, and she can help save us, but she's
your
not.
rudeness prevents you
We're
from
gonna
talking.
die.
Your rudeness. She's the rude one. You know, it's just, you see now, like, you can't even, by the way, that's considered to be a peaceful protest, right? Even with a peaceful, you can't, they don't want you to do anything that's against them. This is all a bunch of rich people. They don't care. They don't care about us. So it's just, she said, we're going to die. Who cares how rude we are?
Sure. Who cares how rude we are?
I don't mind if you die.
You guys hear that? Mr. I don't mind if you die. This clip went viral on Twitter, by the way. The bouginess of it all. Every now and then I got to do stories from Massachusetts to show you that it's not as progressive as you would think, right? To show you the class divide. Now, why is this a big deal? Because when Maura Healey was Attorney General, she actually sued Exxon because of climate issues. This is why I'm telling you. That's why I'm trying to tell you it's so hypocritical. Now that she's governor, things change. Massachusetts climate change case against Exxon can proceed. This was back in May of 2022. And we'll just go through a little snippet of it. Boop-a-boop. A lawsuit by the state of Massachusetts accusing ExxonMobil of misleading the public about climate change can go forward. The state's highest court has ruled. Goes on to say the case filed in 2019 by Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey alleges Exxon launched an effort reminiscent of the tobacco industry's long denial campaign about the dangerous effects of cigarettes to deceive consumers and investors about climate change. A lower court ruling previously rejected the company's argument that a state law shielded it from the lawsuit. The state Supreme Judicial Court upheld that ruling on Tuesday. A phone message seeking comment was left with Exxon, which has denied spreading disinformation about the contribution of fossil fuels to global warming. The company has previously called lawsuits attempting to hold it responsible for climate change disinformation baseless and without merit. Lawsuits against fossil fuel companies have proliferated in recent years as more research has emerged documenting their role in casting doubt on climate change science. Research has overwhelmingly demonstrated that burning oil, gas, and coal contributes to warming Earth's atmosphere and destabilizing the climate, with catastrophic results including increased flooding, extreme weather, and more frequent heat waves. Now let's get back to Maura. The Massachusetts lawsuit says Exxon engaged in a sophisticated multi-million-dollar campaign to sow doubts in climate science and downplay the link between fossil fuels and climate change. The lawsuit says Exxon also undertook greenwashing campaigns in an effort to portray itself as environmentally responsible. Healey called the court's ruling a resounding victory in the state's efforts to stop Exxon from lying to investors and customers. Exxon's repeated attempts to stonewall our lawsuit have been baseless, and this effort was no different, she said in a statement. We look forward to proceeding with our case and having our day in court to show how Exxon is breaking the law and to put an end to the deception once and for all. So someone changed. It wasn't those climate activists. It was Maura. A hot mess. I'll take the comments on Rockfin, Corey. We got to call it all out. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Sab, I told you how much us Gen Xers have learned from you millennials. Boomers push their fear of R onto us. You help us break cycle. We should have given West talking points Tuesday, telling him to tell them that they need to stop telling us about individual votes because they're inconsequential. Start showing us how many ECVs they won. In a winner take the entire state system, George Wallace was the last third to win ECVs in 1968. So that's electoral college votes, you guys. Thank you for the tip, Sam. Thanks, B2 Eric T. Thanks. And thank you for this as well, Roger. Ha ha, get out, get out. You've been a climate activist longer than I've been alive and shit got worse. How effective are you drinking your wine? We've no idea of how to get things done. Neither do you, MFer. You don't care if we die. Well, that is obvious. Sabby, please contact them and bring them on the show. I want to talk to them into running a Massachusetts CBI banning fossil fuels and how to make it easier to run them also. I can reach out. And shout out to Willie Weeder for becoming a Sabby member. Whoopity whoop. Whoopity whoop. Z Manny says this is the scary, aggressive side under the sweet exterior that they showed so well in the movie Get Out. Thank you for the super chat, Delthea. Young people aren't trying to get things done. They are trying to get this done. Here you go, Delthea. And speaking of trying to get it done. So last night was the GOP primary debate. I was actually on a panel on the Katie Halper show watching it live. It was entertaining, I have to admit. I didn't think it would be, considering the fact that Trump wasn't a part of the debate, but it was pretty entertaining. And there's a couple of highlights that I want to discuss and some things I think that we need to pay attention to. And there's also a poll in reference to this as well. Now, first, I want to start off. This is actually kind of funny. Glenn Greenwald was actually there covering the primary debates, and he noticed something. So it turns out that Glenn was sitting right behind Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene at the GOP presidential debate. It says her attention appears to be at least divided. Let's see what Glenn's talking about. So this is Marjorie Taylor Greene, and on her phone, it looks like she's watching the Tucker Carlson interview with Donald Trump. Let me see. Hold on. Let me zoom in better. There we go. See? So she was watching, I guess she was watching that interview, listening to that and the debate at the same time. So that was pretty interesting. Had to start off with something funny. Okay. There were some winners. I think there were some losers. I'm going to tell you who I think won, despite what the New York Post is saying. And I'm going to tell you who I think needs to leave this race. Okay? Let's get started here with Nikki Haley. There's a clip here of Nikki Haley where I feel like she said something on that stage last night that none of the other candidates said or were willing to admit. And that is that Nikki Haley did not just blame the Democratic Party in reference to the economy. She also blamed the Republican Party. Let's take a look.
I don't care about polls. What I care about the fact is that no one is telling the American people the truth. The truth is that Biden didn't do this to us. Our Republicans did this to us too. When they passed that $2.2 trillion COVID stimulus bill, they left us with 90 million people on Medicaid, 42 million people on food stamps. No one has told you how to fix it. I'll tell you how to fix it. They need to stop the spending. They need to stop the borrowing. They need to eliminate the earmarks that the Republicans brought back in. And they need to make sure they understand these are taxpayer dollars. It's not their dollars. And while they're all saying this, you have Ron DeSantis, you've got Tim Scott, you've got Mike Pence. They all voted to raise the debt. And Donald Trump added $8 trillion to our debt. And our kids are never going to forgive us for this. And so at the end of the day, you look at the 2024 budget, Republicans asked for $7.4 billion in earmarks. Democrats asked for $2.8 billion. So you tell me who are the big spenders. I think it's time for an accountant in the White House.
Vice President.
She was the only one brave enough to say that. Now, do I agree with everything that she said? No. No, I don't. I don't think the spending is as much of an issue. I think they need to talk about, they're not going to do too, but I think they need to talk about MMT. I think they need to talk about modern monetary theory so they can understand how the government spends money. But that being said, she seemed to be the only one. This was at the beginning of the debate to call out Biden and Donald Trump in the same sentence. Now, why is that good for Nikki? That makes people remember her. That makes Nikki stand out. When you have 8 people on the stage, it's kind of easy to be one of those candidates that just fades into the background. I'm going to tell you who some of those people were. For me, that just kind of faded into the background. They're going into the wall. But that makes her stand out. So she was stronger than I thought that she would be. So Nikki Haley was willing to call out both in reference to the economy. Now we move on to this issue here with abortion. Let me make sure I'm pulling up the right one. Ron DeSantis. It was just mind-boggling to me just hearing them argue over how many weeks, and to hear people tell that repetitive lie that Democrats want people to be able to have an abortion all the way up to the time of birth. That is not true. But this particular topic, to me, they weren't even together on this. Things are different. Things are different now. So here's Ron DeSantis' response. I want you to hear what he had to say in reference to abortion.
Well, I would say we sold the biggest election landslide victory in the history of the Republican Party in the state of Florida in 2022. That's what I did. We can win. But second of all, look, you got to do what you think is right. I believe in a culture of life. I was proud to sign the heartbeat bill. I remember one of the most impactful moments of my life was when I heard the heartbeat of my oldest daughter in my wife's womb, and then saw the sonograms of all 3 of my kids. What the Democrats are trying to do on this issue is wrong, to allow abortion all the way up to the moment of birth. I know a lady in—
You hear that? See, that's a repetitive talking point. That is not true. That is not true. You know, both parties lie. Both parties tell exaggerations about the other party. But we have to start calling these things out.
Florida named Penny. She survived multiple abortion attempts. She was left discarded in a pan. Fortunately, her grandmother saved her and brought her to a different hospital. We're better than what the Democrats are selling. We are not going to allow abortion all the way up till birth, and we will hold them accountable for their extremism.
But just to be—
Did you notice that he said it twice? Turnout was low in Florida. His landslide victory is a stretch. Notice he said it twice. He said it towards the beginning and he said it again towards the end so that you'll remember it. You know, as long as they continue to repeat it, then you start to receive it and then you start to believe it. Let's continue.
Clear, Governor, would you sign a 6-week ban federally?
I'm going to stand on the side of life. Look, I understand Wisconsin is going to do it different than Texas. I understand Iowa and New Hampshire are going to do different. But I will support the cause of life as governor and as president.
Hey, Sean Hannity here.
Let's pause here. So he didn't really answer that question in reference to would he support a 6-week federal ban? So he's like, well, I'm pro-life and da-da-da. That still doesn't really answer the question. So I think Ron DeSantis, in some way, shape, or form, for whatever reason, he wasn't willing to be direct with his answer in reference to the 6 weeks. And I think it's because he knows, or his campaign team has warned him, that even when it comes to some Republicans in this country, that is not a popular opinion when we talk about a woman's right to choose. So that's the only thing that I can think of as to why he was not more direct with his response. Now, I just saw someone, you see it, Corey, let me know. I just saw someone in the chat said they were just there. I'll have to find it in a second. Now we're going to go to Nikki Haley in reference to her response in reference to a federal abortion ban. Like I said, it was really weird to hear them argue about weeks.
We need to stop demonizing this issue. This is talking about the fact that unelected justices didn't need to decide something this personal, because it's personal for every woman and man. Now it's been put in the hands of the people. That's great. When it comes to a federal ban, let's be honest with the American people and say it will take 60 Senate votes. It will take a majority of the House. So in order to do that, let's find consensus. Can't we all agree that we should ban late-term abortions? Can't we all agree that we should encourage adoptions? Can't we all agree that doctors and nurses who don't believe in abortion shouldn't have to perform them? Can't we all agree that contraception should be available? And can't we all agree that we are not going to put a woman in jail or give her the death penalty if she gets an abortion?
Let me just pause here for a second, because there was one thing I had to say. Shouldn't contraception be available? How is it not, though? Like, contraception is available, right? So that part there was interesting. I don't know, she lost me a little bit on that. But another part that she said here that I think, again, other people on the stage did not mention or were not willing to admit, the fact that Nikki Haley said you need 60 seats in the Senate and you need to have they need to have control of the Senate and of the House. So what she was admitting to people is that unless that happens, she really can't sit up here and make any promises to you in reference to some type of federal law when it comes to abortion. No one else wanted to mention that. And we see this happening every debate. Everyone gets up there and they say what they're going to do, but they never want to mention, well, yes, if we had the House and the Senate, but this is what we need, this, we need that, and then we can make these things happen. So she's already put this stuff out there. So if she were to win, well, I don't think she's going to, but if she were to win, you can't come back and say, why didn't you get these things done? She can always point back to this debate and say, I told you that we needed to have this, this, and this in order for me to do this. So just something to think about.
Let's treat this like a respectful issue that it is and humanize the situation and stop demonizing the situation.
And I've been a champion for life in the Congress, a champion for life as governor and as vice president. And to be honest with you, Nikki, you're my friend, but consensus is the opposite of leadership. When the Supreme Court returned this question to the American people, they didn't just send it to the states only. It's not a states only issue, it's a moral issue. And I promise you, as President of the United States, the American people will have a champion for life in the Oval Office. Can't we have a minimum standard in every state in the nation that says when a baby is capable of feeling pain, an abortion cannot be allowed? A 15-week ban is an idea whose time has come. It's supported by 70% of the American people.
Well, when you're talking about...
You see how they're arguing over weeks? 6 weeks, 15 weeks.
A federal ban. Be honest with the American people. We haven't had 45 pro-life senators in over 100 years. So no Republican president can ban abortions any more than a Democrat president could ban all those state laws. Don't make women feel like they have to decide on this issue when you know we don't have 60 Senate votes in the House.
70%.
See, this is where she's strong. This is where she's strong. Again, I don't agree with Nikki Haley's politics at all. I think she's a war hawk. She was my governor when I lived in South Carolina. I don't agree with her in reference to the politics. But she's right here to explain to not only just Mike Pence, but to everyone else in the audience and the viewers watching, don't sit up there and lie to these people and make them believe that you're going to be able to do this as president of the United States because we don't have the seats. Again, it makes her stand out, so that's smart.
Percent of the American people support legislation to ban abortion after a baby is capable of experiencing pain.
70% of the American people support the 15-week ban, is what he's saying. But what she had to clarify is that 70% of politicians in the Senate do not. And that's actually what matters. So she found ways to make herself stand out. Other than the fact that she was the only female candidate on the stage, she found other ways to make herself stand out. In reference to this abortion issue, there is one piece that I felt was missing from the debate last night: healthcare. Because abortion is still a part of healthcare. And out of all the things that they discussed last night, it was really interesting to me that healthcare was not brought into the conversation the way that it should have been, particularly if you're talking about abortion. Now, when we bring up healthcare, that brings me back to healthcare for everybody, right? Universal healthcare. There's all these other countries that have healthcare for everyone in their country. And then there's the US, like the wealthiest country in the world. And we can blame different things. We can say it's because the profit from big pharma, that there are all these politicians taking money from big pharma, so they're never going to approve it. That's part of it. But this was never meant to happen. And I want to show you why it was never meant to happen. Because we talk a lot of times on this channel about class and race. Class and race and race and class. And we often talk about how they're actually intertwined. When it comes to the healthcare issue, I want to show you a video, and I did look this up, as to why we don't have healthcare for everybody in this country, not just because of big pharma, but we're going all the way back from the very beginning when there were other presidents who also posed the idea of having universal healthcare and why it was shot down. Everybody listen to this video. We're all connected, whether you believe it or not. Listen to this.
White people, watch this video, and I'll be right back.
He published a book called Race, Tendencies, and Traits of the American Negro, in which he lays out all the numbers, and then he concludes that if we simply avoided allowing Black people to have any access to health care, that within 2 or 3 generations, the whole race would die out, and that would solve the race problem in America. When Teddy Roosevelt, 1912, proposed a national health care system, people said no because Black people will get it. When Franklin Roosevelt proposed a national health care system, it was the same thing. We don't want Black people to get it.
I'm going to let this finish, but that's already 2 presidents way before Bernie Sanders decided to run for president or was even born. Maybe not born, but before he decided to run for president, who already tried to do this. National health care plan for everybody. Universal health care for everybody. Going all the way back then, before politicians were taking money from big pharma, before we had super PACs. Let's let him finish.
When Truman tried it in 47, same thing. Don't want Black people to get it. We have to figure out a way to keep Black people from using Medicare. And the way that they came up with was to have a 20% hole, a gap in Medicare, so that you had to pay 20% of your doctor's bill and your hospital bill. And that would discourage poor Black people from showing up at the hospitals. Nearly 100% of the reason why the United States is the only country in the world that doesn't define healthcare as a right is because of racism. He published a book.
Let me pause here for a second. He mentioned that 20%. Let me go back for a little bit because that piece is important.
Of the reason why the United States is the only country in the world that doesn't define healthcare as a right is because of racism. He published a book called Race, Tendencies, and Traits of the American Negro.
Let me chime in here for a second. That 20% that he was referring to, that's that co-insurance. And does that discourage Black people from going to the doctor and going to get like healthcare treatments or checkups and things like that? Absolutely. But not just Black people. You see what ends up happening? Some of these policies and laws that were implemented in this country to keep Black people down and to affect Black people, it actually ended up impacting poor and working class white people. And this is where class and race intersect. This is why when I tell you class is race and race is class, this is exactly what I'm referring to. So some of the policies that were implemented in this country to keep Black people down, they didn't realize at the time that that would actually hurt poor and working class white people too. Listen to what she says.
How many times do I have to say this? Racism is a detriment to you white folks, poor white folks especially. Yep. Because of racism, you poor white folks can't even get good health care. because they thought if they could deny health care to black people that we would have been eradicated a long time ago. But hey, we still here, and they have not changed the rules. How crazy is that? Even with Social Security, you have to pay 20% because of racism. We keep telling you, BIPOC keep telling you, black people keep telling you, it is not us that makes your life suck. It is those racist politicians and their racist legislation that they think that's going to harm us, but harms you at the same time. And they don't care if it harms you. They don't give a shit. And then you continue to vote against your own interest.
And they don't care if it harms you because, again, if you are not in their class bracket, they don't care about you. They don't care about poor people. They don't care about working class people. Why do you think they let the companies treat the unions the way they do? These people go on strike and they go vote against them anyway. Why do you think they let the people, the laborers, are treated the way that they are in this country? They don't care if you're black, right? That's a class issue, right? But then you have to look at who's the working class. This is why. This is why. So what killed me was last night, as much as they were talking about abortion and all this other stuff, I'm like, where is the healthcare conversation, particularly considering we just went through a pandemic in this country? There were a lot of things that were missing last night from that debate that I'm like, I can't believe they're not even talking about this. I'll let her finish and we'll go back to the highlights.
All because a bunch of rich white people told y'all to hate black people because black people are doing stuff to you as a whole. And we're not, because we don't control shit. We don't control the healthcare system. We don't control Social Security. We don't control your wages. We don't control shit. But they continue to tell you that it's us. So you turn your focus on us and harass the shit out of us for no fucking reason, when we have no power to affect your life as a whole community. Pay attention.
I mean, it's true. Someone said, Corey, I think they want the link to that video. If you can put the link to the TikTok in the chat whenever you get a chance. But yeah. Like it. And that's the thing that people don't understand. Meanwhile, rich people are exploiting all of us. All of us, man. They continue to tell you it's because of the immigrants. It's because of the black people. It's because of this person. It's because of that person. No. They just want to get you to blame someone else, have someone else be the scapegoat, so you're not paying attention to what they're doing. Because if you're paying attention to what they're doing, you realize they're the ones that are the problem. Now we get back to the debate. We're going to bring up this guy named Doug. Now, Doug Burgum, I'm going to tell you something that was missing with him too. Doug is from North Dakota. Now, Doug is going to tell you about some challenges that we're facing in this country. But there's something the entire night. Doug was on this stage and had millions of viewers. Doug left out something very important that you guys should know. And I'm going to tell you what Doug didn't tell you. This was his opportunity and he blew it.
I understand why America's hurting. Biden's inflation is choking us. I grew up in a small town. My dad died when I was a freshman in high school. My mom, widow of 3, went back to work. Every job I had growing up was one where I took a shower at the end of the day, not at the beginning of the day.
That can be taken different ways. Some people get your mind out the gutter, but that can be taken different ways.
Our cities are less safe because of the fentanyl pouring into this country. Our economy is being crushed by Biden's energy policies, which are raising the cost of every product you buy, not just the gasoline at the pump. One thing that I'll do as president, I'll secure the border. I'll get this economy sprinting, not crawling like it is right now. And I would say that other thing is for sure, when I'm on a horseback in the Badlands of North Dakota, it looks like the horizon is just limitless.
And when you can almost see beyond that horizon, you can see that this great country, our future is unlimited. But we've got to focus on innovation, not regulation. We've got to cut the red tape. We've got to drive ourselves forward. The way we win the Cold War with China is by growing our economy and through innovation. And as president, I will bring out the best of America. I will improve every American life.
Here's what Doug forgot to mention. The entire 2 hours last night, Doug is from North Dakota. He said it multiple times throughout the debate. Here he is talking about the economy, how the economy is a mess and a disaster. He goes on to tell you he grew up in a small town. But not once through the entire night does Doug tell you what they have in North Dakota that the other states in this country do not have. A public bank. The Bank of North Dakota. This was your moment, Doug. And I ain't even trying to rock with Doug like that. But this was his moment. You're on the national stage. This was your moment to tell everybody about public banking and that you have a public bank in North Dakota. Not once did he mention how people in North Dakota actually were not affected by the 2008 housing crisis the way that people in other states were. You know why? Because they have a public bank. You blew it, Doug. Like, I was watching this last night and I was thinking to myself, if Roger Meadows sees this and he sees that this guy's from North Dakota, the first thing Roger's going to say is, you're not going to mention how you were able to do some of those things in North Dakota because you have a public bank? This really could have been Doug's moment, and Doug blew it. Bye, Doug. That's something people should know about. We're moving on to Vivek. Vivek probably was the most attacked candidate on the stage last night. You would think people would come after Ron DeSantis since he's in second place, but no. People were coming after Vivek. They did not like Viv. I'm going to show you the first clip here. This is in reference to Ukraine. Now, what was very telling last night is I said there are certain people who really stand out and there are people who started to fade into the background. Doug missed his moment and faded into the background. Vivek really stood out last night, in my opinion. And one of the reasons that he stood out is because when it came to the question about giving Ukraine more money, he was the only candidate who raised his hand and said no. So you can't forget that. Let's see the exchange here.
Mr. Ramaswamy, you would not support an increase of funding to Ukraine?
I would not. And I think that this is disastrous, that we are protecting against an invasion across somebody else's border when we should use those same military resources to prevent across the invasion of our own southern border here in the United States of America. We are driving Russia further into China's hands. The Russia-China alliance is the single greatest threat we face. And I find it offensive that we have professional politicians on the stage that will make a pilgrimage to Kyiv, to their Pope, Zelensky, without doing the same thing for people in Maui or the south side of Chicago or Kensington. I think that we have to put the interests of Americans first, secure our own border instead of somebody else's. And the reality is, this is also how we project strength by making America strong at home.
All right, Mr. Ramaswamy, you would not.
So again, he was the only one that said he would not give more aid to Ukraine. And what was very telling to me is that the other candidates on the stage, I feel like, the neocons, I feel like they are not in touch with the rest of the base, at least the Republican base, that are not for these wars. Did you guys see the difference last night? Did you see the difference between the things that Vivek was saying and the things that Ron DeSantis was kind of there sometimes, but the things that people like Nikki and Tim Scott and Chris Christie were saying? They just kind of want to go along with the okie doke and want things for the most part to remain the way that they were in their party pre-Trump, right? For the most part. Vivek stands out because he's asking for something different. So to me, it did seem like the rest of the candidates seemed to be out of touch. Now there's more. I want to bring up the climate issue, which was raised last night. There was definitely heated exchange here between Vivek and Chris Christie. Listen to this. Now, we all know for the most part where Republicans stand on the climate issue, right? But even with this issue, you could see the difference. Listen to
Polls
this.
consistently show that young people's number one issue is climate change. How will you, as both President of the United States and leader of the Republican Party, calm their fears that the Republican Party doesn't care about climate change?
So we want to start on this with a show of hands. Do you believe in human behavior is causing climate change? Raise your hand if you do.
Look, we're not school children.
First of all, listen to the way that the question was worded, right? Human behavior. That's broad. That can mean different things, right?
Have the debate. I mean, I'm happy to take it to start. Alexander, so do you want to raise your hand or not? I don't think that's the way to do. So let me just say to Alexander this. First of all, one of the reasons our country's decline is because of the way the corporate media treats Republicans versus Democrats. Biden was on the beach while those people were suffering. He was asked about it. He said, no comment. Are you kidding me? As somebody that's handled disasters in Florida, you got to be activated. You've got to be there. You've got to be present. You've got to be helping people who are doing this. And here's the deal.
Let's just answer the question.
So is that a yes or is that a yes?
The question was...
Is that a hand raise?
You do not.
I think it was a hand raise for him, and it's my hands are in my pockets.
No,
because
no,
the
I
climate change agenda is a hoax. Let us be honest as Republicans. I'm the only person on the stage who isn't bought and paid for, so I can say this. The climate change agenda is a hoax. The climate change agenda is a hoax.
So here's Vivek basically calling out that the other candidates are, I guess, bought and paid for by corporate interests, corporate money, but Vivek is corporate too. So I don't know what he's trying to do here. But do you see this? Now, obviously, he doesn't believe in climate change. I disagree heavily with Vivek on this issue. But again, I felt like this was just another way to make himself stand out.
And we have to declare independence for it. And the reality is, the anti-carbon agenda is the wet blanket on our economy. And so the reality is more people are dying of bad climate change policies than they are of actual climate change.
Governor Healey, are you bought and paid for?
Down by
Hold on.
in the last century.
Listen.
No.
That didn't make any sense. But watch this.
Hold on.
I've had enough. I've had enough already tonight of a guy who sounds like ChatGPT standing up here. And the last person in one of these debates, Brett, who stood in the middle of the stage and said, what's a skinny guy with an odd last name doing up here, was Barack Obama, and I'm afraid we're dealing with the same type of amateur standing on stage tonight.
I told you guys, this is the one time you'll see me agree with Chris Christie, and I'm going to show you the evidence of that in a second. I told you guys that Vivek reminded me a lot of Barack Obama. His mannerisms, some of the things that he's saying, not on policy, but his mannerisms, some of the things that he would say and the way that he would say it, the Harvard connection, the model minority, so to speak. I told you there was something there that reminded me of Barack Obama. Let me let them finish. The ChatGPT thing was kind of funny.
Give me a hug just like you did to Obama.
The same type of amateur.
And you'll help elect me just like you did to Obama, too. Give me that
the same type of amateur.
Hold on. Governor Healey, would you like to respond? Are you bought and paid for?
What I would like to say is the fact that I think this is exactly why Margaret Thatcher said, if you want something said, ask a man. If you want something done, ask a woman.
And here goes the woman card. Now I'm going to use this as an example to show you how both parties are similar, even when it comes to the identity card. Because if it was the other way around, and it's the Democrats on the stage, and it's a woman, and she's a candidate for president, and if she says what Nikki says, if you want something done, ask a woman, the next morning on Fox News, it's going to be the Democrats using the identity. But yet here you see the same thing happening. Here you see on the right, using the identity card. If you want something done, ask a woman. And then you can see on MSNBC or you can see in CNN, oh, look at her using the woman card because she's the only woman on stage. This is an example that shows you that both parties are similar. Let's continue.
First of all, we do care about clean air, clean water. We want to see that taken care of, but there's a right way to do it. And the right way to do it is, first of all, yes, is climate change real? Yes, it is. But if you want to go and really change the environment, then we need to start telling China and India that they have to lower their emissions.
That part right there is actually important. It has to be a global effort. It can't just be the United States, right? But here's Nikki Haley telling you that climate change is real. Let's continue. Interesting night.
That's where our problem is. And these green subsidies that Biden has put in, all he's done is help China because he doesn't understand all these electric vehicles that he's done. What that does, half of the batteries for electric vehicles are made in China. And so that's not helping the environment. You're putting money in China's pocket. And Biden did that. So first of all.
So make the electric batteries here. I don't know. Maybe it's a silly idea, but maybe we should go back to producing and manufacturing in this country like we used to. It just seemed like another reason for me to like throw shade towards China.
I think we need to acknowledge the truth, which is these subsidies are not working. We also need to take on the international world and say, okay, India and China, you've got to stop polluting. And that's when we'll start to deal with
Senator Scott, are you bought and paid for?
Absolutely.
Are you bought and paid for?
I'm sorry?
Are you bought and paid
Absolutely not. I mean, here's what the American people deserve is a debate about the issues that affect their lives. Going back and forth, being childish is not helpful to the American people to decide on the next leader of our country. Number one, wait a second. Number two, as a kid who grew up in a single-parent household mired in poverty, I wondered, was the American dream real for kids who were devastated by poverty, devastated by the challenges of life? I came to the conclusion that America can do for anyone what she's done for me if we focus on restoring hope, creating opportunities, and protecting America. If we want the environment to be better, and we all do, the best thing to do is to bring our jobs home from China. If we create 10 million new jobs in my Made in America plan, we will have a better economy and a better environment. Let me tell you why I say that, Brett.
Nothing about the military-industrial complex. This entire conversation in reference to climate, not one person mentioned anything about the military-industrial complex, which is the largest single most polluter in the world. That piece is important.
America,
do it quickly.
America has cut. I'm a Southern boy. I talk slow. So America. That was quick. America has cut our carbon footprint in half in the last 25 years. The places where they are continuing to increase: Africa, 950 million people. India, over 1 billion. China, over 1 billion. Why would we put ourselves at a disadvantage? Devastating our own economy. Let's bring our jobs home.
Hey, Sean Hannity here.
Tim and Doug, I think they can go ahead and exit this race. And then I want to show you this clip here. Oh, we can go to the second part, Corey. Yeah, Tim and Doug, I think, can go home. There's also the guy I always forget about, Aisha Hutchinson. He can also go home. Half the time we don't remember he's standing there. Let's just keep it real. Chris Christie might stick around for a little bit, but to be honest with you, I think that Chris Christie is not actually running for president. I think he's running for fame. And I thought what was funny is this piece right here, when Vivek actually tells Chris Christie that he's actually running to be president of MSNBC. Listen to this.
Swami, you raise your hand supporting.
No, I'd like to get in and respond. Let's just speak the truth, okay? President Trump, I believe, was the best president of the 21st century. It's a fact. And Chris Christie honest to God, your claim that Donald Trump is motivated by vengeance and grievance would be a lot more credible if your entire campaign were not based on vengeance and grievance against one man. And if people...
That's a good point. Like, this is the things, like, on policy, I do not agree with any of them. But that point, you kind of can't say that it's not true, because that's what Chris Christie has been doing. Vote for me, I'm not Trump. That's what it feels like. Now, to that point, where Vivek may run into trouble is when he continues to say that Donald Trump was the best president of the 21st century. I thought Donald Trump was a great president. This is why that could hurt him. Basically, if that's how you feel, why are you running for president? Now, when he's asked that question, he goes on to say that because he wants to expand on Trump's policies, he wants to expand on what Trump did. Can't Donald Trump just do that since they were his policies? So this is why I would be careful, because, again, no one else on that stage is saying that. He's saying that. So it may come down to a point where voters have to decide, do they want to just vote for Donald Trump again and get the real deal, or do they want to vote for a Trump copy? You see what I'm saying? So he has to find a way to distinguish himself from that. Now, we'll go on to say other things, because Andrew Yang comes in here in just a second in reference to who he may remind you of as well.
At home, want to see a bunch of people blindly bashing Donald Trump without an iota of vision for this country. They could just change the channel to MSNBC right now. But I'm not running for president of MSNBC. I am running for president of the United States. We're skating on thin ice, and we cannot set a precedent where the party in power uses police force to indict its political opponents. It is wrong. We have to end the weaponization of justice in this country.
You raise your hand supporting.
So it's obvious, as you can see, Vivek was really a strong contender last night. And to that MSNBC point, I'm not going to play this entire clip, but I just want to prove a point. This morning, guess who was on MSNBC? Chris Christie. Running for president of MSNBC.
And how do you think that you did in the debate last night? And what did you think of the field without Trump in it?
Well, look, I felt good about how we did last night. You know, I wanted to make sure that everybody, both in that arena and much more importantly, all of the people watching at home understand that I'm going to stand up and tell the truth about where our country needs to go and about how Donald Trump has failed us and would fail our party if he were ever made the nominee again. But also talked about important issues. You know, I guess Wes must have turned in early last night. Didn't hear me talking about education. I was talking about that last night on the stage, talking about my trip to Ukraine and how important it was for us to stand against Vladimir Putin. And when Vivek Ramaswamy was just, you know, getting too out of hand, the moderators wouldn't try to control him, so I did.
Oh, it's the moderator's fault. Mr. President of MSNBC, give me a news anchor spot, please. Give me a news anchor spot when this gig don't work out. My presidential campaign, Chris Christie is thinking, right? That we're thinking. Now, Andrew Yang actually has had some good things to say about Vivek. And some people have pointed out that Andrew Yang or Vivek is actually the Andrew Yang of the GOP because he's an entrepreneur, right? He's successful entrepreneur like Andrew Yang was. Let's pull this up here. I want to show you what Andrew Yang said. I wrote a couple of weeks ago that it's Vivek. I think it is Vivek. I think I've been pronouncing his name wrong. I wrote a couple of weeks ago that it's Vivek who is most likely to defeat Trump in the Republican field. Last night didn't change my mind. But you know what didn't change my mind? Mine as well? The fact that Vivek reminded me of Barack Obama. And here's video evidence here.
So first, let me just address a question that is on everybody's mind at home tonight. Who the heck is this skinny guy with a funny last name, and what the heck is he doing in the middle of this debate stage? I'll tell you, I'm not a politician.
Of a mill worker's son who dares to defy the odds. The hope of a skinny kid with a funny name who believes that America has a place for him too.
I told you. I told you he reminded me of Barack Obama. There you go. Now, some people are criticizing the debate in reference to the importance of the issues that were discussed. Now, RFK Jr. said something. I do agree with this statement that he made, and I think people need to hear this. I know some of you like, Sabs, you've been hard on RFK Jr. lately. I say good things too. When there's good things done, I mention the good things as well. But this piece right here, I think, is really important because he talked about what he felt was missing from the debate. The hashtag GOP debate last night was out of sync with the mood of the country. It began with a request for a comment on Oliver Anthony's Ain't Got a Dollar song, Richmond, North of Richmond. Not that it is an extraordinary song, raw yet intelligent, defiant yet compassionate. It's about working class hardship. It is about low wages, BS pay. It's about degraded food supply, elite corruption, obesity, homelessness, and despair. Candidates could have talked about these things, but they said nothing about the desperation plus the hardship of working people. They said nothing about wages or housing, food, childcare, plus medical costs, or what we can do about it. They said nothing about systemic corruption that enriches corporations plus elites as swaths of the former middle class fall into poverty. Instead, they recycled Reagan-era cliches about cutting spending, being tough on drugs and crime, China, etc., and ending abortion. They were obsessed with America's adversaries, but blind to how our policies have been deliberately constructed to create adversaries and enrich the defense industry while bankrupting the nation. They were obsessed with closing the border, which I agree with, but have no proposals to expand legal immigration or address the conditions that drive migration. Again, in large part, that is U.S. policy. They obsess about cutting spending, except defense. They want more of that, but offer not innovative proposals to address the decay of our infrastructure, wages, and environment. Our nation deserves better than posturing plus bickering masquerading as debate. Instead of arguing, we can tap into the swelling popular will to turn this country around. Oliver Anthony tapped into something that can unify our nation. Nearly everyone wants to reverse our decline, to end corruption, to rebuild from the inside. Let's talk about how to do that. They said none of those things. Nothing about housing, nothing about the wages, like the minimum wage wasn't mentioned. None of it. And again, this is where I say, I feel like with the exception of Vivek, I feel like the other candidates on that stage are out of touch. They are stuck in this Reagan type of politics that just doesn't really fly with the American people during a time when people are in such despair. And if you do not address the needs of the people in the nation, the people will turn away from you. Now, I think the biggest threat to Donald Trump for that reason is Vivek. The New York Post put out an article that said that Ron DeSantis was the winner of the first 2024 Republican debate. I disagree. I'm not even going to read that article, but I disagree. Ron DeSantis did better than I thought that he would. But you also have to remember that Ron DeSantis is backed by a lot of donors. He's also backed by Fox News. Remember that story came out where Rupert Murdoch decided not to go with Donald Trump and to go with Ron DeSantis this go round. So of course the media, the mainstream media, is going to say the person who won is the person that the donors want to win. Clearly, anyone who was watching that debate last night, I think the strongest contender that I saw is Vivek. And I think he did a better job than Ron DeSantis did. And I don't agree with any of these dudes' policies, but I can still see how people perform. And I think that's something that people need to address. Let's be real. You're already seeing it happening where the media is already going for Ron DeSantis. I think the American people who saw that debate last night can say that, no, he did not win. So they're already starting it. Glenn Greenwald also had criticisms of that debate. Again, he was there in person. I just want to go ahead and play the video for you. It's about 2 minutes. Listen to what Glenn had to say. He's pretty spot on with these things. Plus, he was actually there.
You saw these politicians, Nikki Haley, Chris Christie, Tim Scott, Mike Pence, who really sound like they're from the Republican Party of 2004, 2008, 2012. They would fit perfectly within the party of Mitt Romney and John McCain and George Bush when he was running. I don't think they have any conception of the fact that the reason 2016 and Donald Trump's victory was such a cataclysmic moment in American politics, it isn't that Trump ushered in changes in how Republican Party voters were thinking about things like militarism and imperialism and war and priorities and the swamp and their contempt for corporatism and lobbyists and the way that they run Washington. Those sentiments predated Trump. He detected them, he observed them, and he was the one who was able best to give voice to them. If you go back and look at Ron Paul's campaign in 2008 and 2012, he was sounding exactly those same things. Going into South Carolina and Iowa and some of the deepest red districts that are in the early part of that Republican presidential campaign and railing against neoconservatives and the evils of the Iraq War and the complete waste of funds that go into constant new regime change wars in places like Syria and Libya that not only come at the expense of the American people in terms of the money that's spent not on their interests but on the interests of other people, but also the dangers that are brought to the United States as a result of doing that. The reason why there's so much anti-Americanism, the reason why the world is now gathering in this confederation under BRICS, under China, that's expanding because of this narrative. And so I don't think these politicians have any sense at all of the radical changes in the views of the population of the people who compose their own parties. They sound like Reagan-era militarists when it comes to foreign policy, and that is just radically out of step with the Republican Party voter, which is why you see Vivek rising in the polls while Donald Trump has a 45-point lead, while DeSantis remains a viable candidate, while avoiding that sort of thing, and the rest of them who sound like they're from that old Republican establishment era cannot get traction, and it's inconceivable that they will, because the things they're saying actually resonate now more in the Democratic Party.
Where's the lie? We're going to look at the poll. If you haven't had a chance to go ahead and vote, go ahead and vote. So we'll see what you guys thought in reference to who is the biggest threat towards Donald Trump. Which GOP candidate is the biggest threat to Trump? 9% said Nikki Haley, 18% said Ron DeSantis, 65% said Vivek Ramaswamy, and 8% said Chris Christie. And I can only put 4 choices in reference to the YouTube poll. They only give me 4 options. I can only put 4 down. But at the same time, the other people wouldn't have made it on this list anyway, because they're just not, I'm not feeling it. We're not feeling it. Like, let's just be real. Tim Scott can go home. Aisha can go home. Doug, who forgot to mention Bank of North Dakota in reference to economic issues, can also go home. These people we know they're not going nowhere. Nikki may still have a chance. Chris Christie might still hang around, but those 3 people I just mentioned to you, they can go ahead and go home. Just keeping it real. Sorries. I'm going to go to some of the comments here in the chat. Shout out to Joey for being a member for 2 months. That guy at the end is with Make-A-Wish Foundation. Gina and I roll with Climate Defiance. Is there a call-in tonight? There is not. I did call in on Tuesday, and I still can't even publish that episode. A call-in app is acting wonky. I might have to find something different, to be honest. Miss Mississippi said Tim Scott needs to leave this race. Yeah. Oh, Tim. Anthony, I just got done taking that debate stage down for IATSE wagers. 22 base, 11 hours, time and a half after 8, meal penalty the last hour. Damn. Damn, Anthony. Joey again says Doug is in real estate and investments. His investment group owns much of the Fargo, Bismarck, Williston, and Dickinson slum apartments. Interesting. Go home, Doug. Echo J says big banks paid Doug to keep quiet. Probably. Thank you, Janice. Bacon rebellion equals a united poor almost overthrow the wealthy caps exploiting them. The cap divide is conquer strategy keep us fighting each other to prevent class solidarity. Thank you, Quintessential. Should RFK Jr. promise to be a carbon copy of his father? Wouldn't that make him more popular? And Trump gonna win primary? This debate just for laughs. I mean, I think people should be their self. I don't think you should try to be, someone you're not. I think he can try to come correct on some of these issues, though. Thank you, Alex. Swami. Oh, Robama Swami. Oh, that's cute, Alex. Thank you so much for that. And I'll take those comments on Rockfin. Thank you for the tip, Helena. And thank you for the tip, Samuel. And thank you, Roger. Wrong. Nikki. Federal government doesn't pay for things with taxes. Also, no one gives a F about our national debt, with credit card debt hitting 1 trillion because paychecks are under H2O. We want to know what you're going to do about the personal debt. Brett brought up the homelessness crisis, and I didn't hear how they're going to get people into homes. Does anyone remember how they addressed this issue? What about you, Sab? You remember. I remember. Thank you for this as well. Yes, Nikki was honest about that regarding the filibuster. However, with her "can we all agree to" spiel, where was the "can we all agree" for the best way to stop abortion is improve mom and dad's economic condition? Economic incentives to start families. Sab, when it comes to helping workers, they didn't even mention them. They are still using the indirect method, trickle down strategy, instead of helping workers directly. They refuse to speak on getting paychecks 3 feet above water. Doug don't want to admit that because it is socialist banking. So I had no expectations. Matter of fact, I would have been surprised if he did mention Public Bank of North Dakota. Sab, the biggest crisis Americans face today is paychecks underwater, the rent's too high, infrastructure and low-income housing crumbling, corporate nickel and diming us, true healthcare. The only thing mentioned was street crime, which is caused by what I just mentioned above, the migrant crisis, which would mean they'd have to mention coups they ran south of Texas, and depleting of manufacturing base, which is trade deals they voted for, which they have no plan of how to solve these issues except more cops at the border and in the streets. Anyone hear their plan for bringing manufacturing jobs back? Nope. The reason why they're not talking about these issues in Out of Touch, talking about national spending and Debt America Strong is because they refuse to take questions from the audience. And if they do, they are filtered. Look how Bush Sr. was stumped by Sister's Question in 1992. I found book in PDF from Hartman mentioned here. It is put in the chat. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I mean, I don't understand how, given that we have the inflation, homelessness has increased in this country, I don't understand how that entire debate, they really did not talk about the needs of the American people. I don't know how you go with that. I really don't. All right, guys, I'll have to pick up Washington and Utah tomorrow night because I am way over time. So I have to head out. But I do want to say thank you guys so much for hanging out with me tonight. I'll be back live again tomorrow night We do have 2 guests coming on to explain how to get ballot access for Dr. West. So they're going on different shows to explain this to people in reference to the Green Party. And other than that, I will see you then. So have a good night. Keep up the fight.